Lord of Mysteries, Lord of Order. By Bu Xiong. Chapter 76 to 100. Backland's East Borough, Iron Gate Bridge Street. Early September in Backland had already shed the heat of August. A gentle breeze sweeping across one's face should have brought a pleasant sensation, but the poor air quality in the East Borough made it impossible to feel happy. Aaron, dressed in casual clothes, walked with the crisp echo of his leather shoes on the flagstones, while Glen Wales followed behind him with a bitter smile. It had been over a week since Aaron joined MI9. Yet, in this entire week, not a single mission had been assigned to their 4th Special Investigation Group. Although he had somewhat anticipated being suppressed to a certain extent before coming, Aaron truly hadn't expected to encounter obstacles even when interrogating criminals. If no missions were assigned, then he would take the initiative to seek them out himself. After making up his mind, he and group leader Glenn came to Iron Gate Bridge Street, planning to try their luck at the Bravehearts Bar, and asked Caspaz if he had any recent rumors. Bravehearts Bar, behind the counter. Caspaz wore a melancholic expression, his brows tightly furrowed, lost in thought, until he saw 2 special guests enter through the door. They were special because of the aura about them. Even though they deliberately wore ordinary clothes, it was difficult to conceal from an old hand like him. Aaron led Glenn into the bar, found 2 seats near the counter, and ordered 2 South Wales beers. Since he was with someone this time, Aaron didn't want to expose his death mask ability. He just did a simple disguise to prevent others from recognizing him. Caspaz felt the faint pressure emanating from the 2 people in front of him, and as if he had thought of something, his face turned a little pale. Aaron clearly noticed the abnormality on his face, his heart stirred, and he exchanged a glance with Glenn, then spoke while taking out his identification. "You're Caspaz, right? We're from MI9, and we'd like to ask you about something." Caspaz clearly knew about MI9. He nervously glanced around, then led the 2 in front of him to a private booth. As soon as they entered the booth, he immediately closed the door, and Caspaz said with trembling lips, "Sirs, those matters truly have nothing to do with me. I don't know why they disappeared either." Aaron's heart also lit up. He hadn't expected that trying his luck would actually lead him to a case. He looked at the familiar face in front of him and said, "Whether it has anything to do with you isn't for you to decide. Explain the situation clearly, and I will naturally make a judgment." From Caspaz's narration, Aaron learned about the recent events. In Backland, becoming a bounty hunter isn't difficult, but becoming a famous bounty hunter definitely requires something special, such as mastering a Beyonder ability. In other words, among the active famous bounty hunters, at least 7 or 8 out of 10 are low or mid-sequence Beyonders. And in the past week, many famous bounty hunters in the East Borough had disappeared one after another. What made Caspaz most uneasy was that all those who disappeared had come to him to take on missions. As an informant, he keenly noticed these abnormalities and was constantly in fear because of it. After explaining the situation, he mentioned something that interested Aaron. A bounty hunter was attacked, but she didn't disappear. Instead, she successfully escaped. "I think she should know something." "Oh, her name is Xiong." Aaron raised an eyebrow upon hearing this familiar name, and nodded slightly, indicating that he already understood the entire course of events. The 2 sirs they met didn't intend to arrest him, so Caspaz felt a sense of relief, and his expression softened. Suddenly, a deliberately lowered voice sounded from outside the booth, "Is Caspaz there?" "I've completed the last commission." Caspaz immediately turned to look at Aaron. Before he could speak, Aaron raised his hand, signaling him to go out. Using the Beyonder ability of a sheriff, even with a deliberately lowered voice, he recognized that the owner of this voice was Xiong Derecha. Xiong wore a black robe that covered the elevated parts beneath her feet, concealing her most obvious feature. Xiong was also quite helpless. This outfit was found for her by Furs. Ever since she was attacked last time and barely escaped, Furs, upon seeing her injured, refused to let her go out again, and she hid at home for 2 days. Seeing that the deadline for the commission was approaching, hiding indefinitely wasn't a solution, so she changed into her clothes and secretly slipped out, intending to check the situation. She didn't expect to be discovered by Furs. Although she didn't want her friend to risk herself with her, she was still persuaded by Furs to come along. The reason was simple: if all else failed, they could use that teleportation stone to escape danger. Caspas didn't dare to say much and completed the commission handover with Zio normally, paying the bounty. After receiving the bounty, Zio quickly went to the door and met up with a slightly nervous, peeking Furs. The two walked into a small alley and instantly vanished. Caspas immediately returned to the booth, only to find it already empty. Not far away, at 100 Iron Gate Street, Zio and Furs emerged from a slightly illusory door on the wall. Zio looked at Furs with some envy. "Your door-opening ability is really useful. If we go this way, no one should be able to track us." Furs slightly raised her chin, about to reply haughtily, when she heard a hoarse, unpleasant voice from the corner. He. A shadow rose, revealing 4 black-robed figures within. The leader was Quinlan Eunice, a Sequence 7 shadow ascetic. After Mr. A took full responsibility for the liaison with MI9, the subsequent task of capturing Beyonders for experiments fell to him. Behind him, a black-robed man with a severed arm named Barry Gazar was the one whose arm was torn off by Mr. A last time. A cruel smile appeared on his face as he stared at Zio. "Last time, I wasn't careful and let you slip away. This time, with Lord Quinlan making a move, you two definitely won't escape." Zio and Furs looked at the 4 people opposite them with somewhat pale faces. The leading black-robed man gave them a fatal sense of danger, and the other 3 were also clearly Beyonders. Furs let out a bitter laugh, no longer holding onto any lucky, her fingers tightening around the stone on her wrist, preparing to take Zio and flee. Suddenly, a sword of light and a flaming spear formed from light appeared abruptly, shooting directly towards the leading Quinlan Eunice. Quinlan Eunice was too slow to dodge and was hit directly. A burst of black smoke rose, and his black robe was melted away, revealing a body covered in various strange symbols and twisted patterns beneath the robe. In the alley on the other side, Aaron and Glenn slowly walked out, and the sword of light and flaming spear in their hands recondensed. Furs immediately shivered, somewhat fearfully retracting her gaze, grabbing Zio's arm, and pulling out a rough, dark green stone. She quickly chanted a word in ancient Hermes, "Door." The figures of the two quickly became illusory and shattered, disappearing from their original spot. Aaron's eyes slanted slightly as he saw this scene, also feeling a bit speechless. "Do I look like a bad guy or something? They ran away so fast." Suddenly, a flaming spear appeared in front of Aaron, blocking a black longsword that extended from the shadows. A sizzling sound arose as black smoke billowed from the point where the flaming spear and the black straight sword collided. A faint sense of ominousness emerged, and Glenn's vision suddenly blurred. The black smoke seemed to cling to his eyes, making him increasingly irritable. Aaron only felt a slight discomfort. He decisively activated his spiritual vision and found that an invisible shadow was lingering around him and Glenn. Aaron immediately felt a chill and instantly understood that this was a shadow curse from a Sequence 7 shadow ascetic. He immediately activated his spirituality, and the sun ring on his hand burst forth with warm, pure light, dispelling the shadow. A man covered in strange patterns appeared in front of Aaron's right side. Aaron raised his hand and fired a cleansing bullet, but it only dispersed a shadow substitute. After Glenn recovered his senses, his flaming spear pointed directly at Barry Gezel, who had only one arm left. Among the remaining people, his sequence was the highest. As long as he was dealt with, the other 2 would not escape. Barry's face was ashen. Realizing he had been locked on and had nowhere to hide, his body rapidly distorted, extending tentacles and letting out a strange roar. The flaming spear instantly dimmed and was shattered by the tentacles. As a Sequence 8 listener, Barry could directly hear the whispers of corresponding hidden existences, and he gained this twisted, unique ability while listening to the teachings of the Great Bishop. However, the corresponding price was extremely severe. If he could not end the battle within 5 minutes, he would forever remain in his current state, and his body would continue to mutate into a pile of rotten flesh. As the four confronted each other, the other two black-robed figures raised their pistols. Just as they were about to cock and fire, they suddenly felt a chill throughout their bodies, a cold aura filling them, making them stiff and unable to move. A slightly ethereal spiritual body, similar to a spirit world creature, appeared behind the two, extending its hands into their bodies. This was the wraith possession used by the Sequence 7 spirit world creature from within the death mask, whom Aaron had named Astrolfo. After controlling the two, Astrolfo's body instantly dematerialized and appeared behind Quinlan Yunuo, whom Aaron had forced out of the shadows, instantly merging into his body. Quinlan Yunuo only felt a chilling aura sweep through his body, preventing him from using his shadow leap. A golden light flashed in Aaron's eyes as he used spiritual penetration, taking advantage of Astrolfo's momentary lapse in control after leaving the body. Without giving him time to breathe, an even more brilliant light enveloped Quinlan Yunuo, followed by 3 cleansing bullets that accurately struck his glabella and other vital points. Amidst an unwilling lament, Quinlan Yunuo's body exploded directly, and a pale gray light condensed on his incomplete left hand, forming a special sealed artifact. Without hesitation, Aaron quickly turned to look at Barry Gezel, who was in a stalemate, slightly surprised by his current state. His actions did not stop, however, he changed magazines and reloaded. Looking at Barry Gezel, who was almost completely mutated, Aaron shook his head, used spiritual penetration to briefly stun him, and then ended his life with a cleansing bullet. After the battle, Aaron quickly went to Quinlan Yunuo's shattered corpse, using his body to block Glenn's line of sight. His wrist hung down, and the divination pendant slowly floated above the pale gray, incomplete left hand. Aaron's spirituality surged into the divination pendant, and he closed his eyes, accompanied by low divination incantations. In the hazy dream fragments, Aaron saw, from Quinlan Yunuo's perspective, a man in a black hooded robe with a face so beautiful it was demonic, unlike a male's. Aaron extracted from Quinlan Yunuo's fragmented consciousness that this man was Mr. A of the Aurora Order, and the person sitting on the sofa in front of him was Jonas Coleridge. The dream divination scene, forcibly constructed with a mystical item, was very unstable. Aaron could only barely see the moments most deeply imprinted in Quinlan Yunuo's memory. Scene after scene skipped by. Aaron barely managed to extract a few keywords: cooperation, military intelligence department 9, demoness despair nightingale, and then the dream shattered with a bang. Opening his eyes with some regret, Aaron helplessly watched his spirituality dissipate and the Beander characteristic coalesce from the corpse. If he could take it above the dark gold mist for divination, borrowing the higher authority, he would certainly be able to divine more detailed information, but unfortunately, the current situation did not allow him to do so. Putting away the hand-shaped Beander characteristic, Aaron quickly stood up and met with Glenn, who had already collected Barry's Beander characteristic and was tying up the other 2 black-robed figures not far away. Aaron did not explain what he had just been doing, but instead looked at the 2 men Glenn was holding with interest, nodding in satisfaction. Disrupting the Aurora Order's operation and killing a Sequence 7 and a Sequence 8 was already a considerable merit. The 2 captives could be used to help him digest the interrogator potion. A pale-faced man opened his eyes. He had a full forehead, black hair, brown eyes, and wore nearly circular glasses. The slightly mocking smile that usually hung at the corner of his mouth had long vanished. He looked around and found himself seemingly trapped in a room covered with strange patterns. Iron chains locked the door, and scattered on the floor were the iron chains and locks the man had undone. In his hazy memory, he seemed to have been in this room for an unknown period, and his mind was already somewhat dazed. He only remembered that he seemed to be called Lanerwis, a marauder who had just arrived in Backland from Siviras County. After learning through certain channels that the next sequence was Swindler, he planned to leave Backland for Tingen and establish a steel company. A sharp pain struck, interrupting his memories, and indescribable sounds echoed directly in his mind. The overflowing evil exploded in his mind. In a daze, he even danced gracefully with the air. After Lanerwis came to his senses, the desire to survive seemed to urge him to unlock the iron chains and locks throughout the room. The Marauder's ability allowed Lanerwis to skillfully open the iron locks and undo the iron chains. These iron locks seemed like lines of defense for the mind. As one iron lock after another was opened, the whispers in his mind grew stronger each time, and to Lanerwis's despair, he could no longer stop. Suddenly, the stopped clock in the room began to move, and a strange and unpredictable power began to affect this space. Strange black patterns gradually increased on the room's walls and on Lanerwis's body. Where there had once been a wall, a paint black wooden door automatically appeared, with the last iron lock hanging on it. Lanerwis walked towards the door in a daze, his fingers trembling as he opened the last lock, and gently pushed open the black wooden door. Looking out at the world beyond the door, an incredible scene unfolded before Lanerwis. A cross that filled the sky, and behind the cross was a world-encompassing shadow on which a naked man was nailed with black iron nails and ancient wooden stakes. His arms were spread, his feet were above his head, which hung down like a pendant, and his body was covered in streaks of blood. Ranveer Us instantly closed his eyes, but the terrifying whispers in his mind seemed to be detonated, impacting him wave after wave. The strange black patterns on the room walls and Ranveer Us's body slightly wriggled, avoiding the fate of direct shattering. The patterns gradually converged on Ranveer Us's chest, forming a pitch-black seed that deeply embedded itself, leaving no trace. Immediately after, the room, the chains, and various indescribable scenes began to become illusory, then shattered. Backland East Borough, in the gloomy basement of Torso Street. A group of black-robed figures were nervously recording something, observing the 4 wooden beds in front of them. 3 men and 1 woman lay on them, all pale-faced with tightly closed eyes. Among them, the man on the second bed, with a full forehead, black hair, and brown eyes, wore nearly circular glasses. Even in a coma, the corners of his mouth were slightly upturned, as if mocking everyone. It was Ranveer Us. Suddenly, a black-robed figure spoke in a low voice, "Subject 3 is dying." As his words fell, the man on the third bed suddenly convulsed, a large opening tearing in his chest and abdomen, revealing his damaged internal organs. A light blue and black mixed light converged on the damaged internal organs, forming a disgusting sealed artifact, from which one could hear illusory whispers. He walked forward indifferently, tore off the glowing internal organ, put it away, and then waved his hand. 2 burly men immediately stepped forward, moving the bed and the corpse on it to the corner, covering it with a white cloth. There were 5 other beds covered with blood-stained white cloths in that corner. The black-robed figure standing in front of bed number 2 suddenly raised his eyebrows, looking with wild joy as black patterns appeared on Ranveer Us's exposed body, gradually converging towards his chest. The others also clearly noticed this, and excitedly exclaimed, "As expected of the person Lord Kunlun personally captured, he can actually bear a trace of the Lord's divinity." That's right, but this is only the initial stage. The Lord's consciousness is still relatively weak. We must focus on him and let Lord Kunlun decide the subsequent arrangements after he returns tonight. Backland East Borough, Iron Gate Bridge Street, in a dim room. Aaron had 2 black-robed figures tied in front of him. He did not immediately return to Military Intelligence 9. The Aurora Order deploying so many people to capture and hunt Beyonders must have a motive. He had to seize the opportunity now, before they reacted. Aaron looked indifferently at these lunatics from the Aurora Order, interrogating them sternly, and incidentally experimenting with the Beyonder abilities of an interrogator on them. A moment later, the 2 black-robed figures were already in tears, their bodies convulsing non-stop. As peripheral members of the Aurora Order who had not yet become secret supplicants, their faith was clearly incomparable to those fanatical believers brainwashed by the true Creator. Under Aaron's continuous, spiritual stab, and spiritual whip interrogations, accompanied by painful screams, one black-robed figure finally confessed what had happened. Aaron frowned as he listened, not expecting that group of lunatics from the Aurora Order would secretly attempt to use Beyonders in the East Burrow to contain the true Creator's divinity. However, according to the confession, the experiment had not been successful and had failed many times. Exchanging a solemn glance with Glenn, who was beside him, Aaron's hand glowed with a brilliant light that condensed into a sphere. Under the slightly horrified gazes of the two black-robed figures, he continued to ask, "Where exactly is the basement where the experiment is being conducted? And how many people are still guarding it?" The first person to confess, ignoring the other person's threatening look, quickly responded with a trembling body. "It's in the basement of 112 Torso Street, Backland East Burrow. But there aren't many people left, only a few researchers and one listener and two secret supplicants are guarding it." As if afraid Aaron wouldn't believe him, he hurriedly added, "Many people have been transferred by Mr. A, and we didn't dare to ask." Aaron nodded with satisfaction, and casually gave the other fierce-looking person a spiritual stab, making him convulse all over. Then he looked at Glenn and chuckled. "I'm going to the restroom." Ignoring Glenn's strange gaze, Aaron walked into the washroom, stood before the mirror, his divining pendulum hanging down. His spirituality pulsed as he silently chanted, "His words just now are true." After chanting 7 times, Aaron opened his eyes, and after receiving the correct revelation, he nodded in satisfaction and walked out of the washroom. Without giving the two black-robed figures a chance to react, Aaron directly knocked them unconscious, tying them into a pretzel with a rope, and said to Glenn, "Go to the nearest police station and gather all members of our 4th investigation team. Tell them we have work tonight, and everyone should assemble." Glenn instinctively nodded in agreement. Just as he was about to turn and leave, he suddenly remembered that he seemed to be the team leader. He then shook his head with a smile and disappeared into the night. Aaron looked at the two unconscious figures on the ground, put on his death mask, and his figure vanished from the spot. After the colorful surroundings returned to normal, Aaron had already appeared on a rooftop near 112 Torso Street, Backland East Burrow. Looking at 112 Torso Street not far away, even with careful observation using his spiritual vision, he couldn't detect any abnormalities. Aaron guessed that a large-scale spiritual wall might have been set up in the basement, isolating any unusual aura. To catch everyone in one swoop, Aaron did not act rashly. His figure flickered as he scouted the environment near 112 Torso Street, finally arriving in a small alley not far away, quietly waiting for his team members to arrive. About 3/4 of an hour later, accompanied by rustling footsteps, Glenn and the remaining team members met up with Aaron. Glenn had already briefed the team members on the way, so Aaron didn't say much. He cleared his throat and began to assign their respective tasks. The Beyonders who were captured and became experimental subjects, their condition is difficult to ascertain. Although their sequences are low, the danger is significant. Therefore, I and the captain will directly enter to eliminate dangerous targets. The 3 of you will spread out around the house to prevent any escapees, and after the dangerous targets are eliminated, quickly follow up to control the scene. The listener, Gil, stood frowning at the door, looking at the wall clock. He felt a vague unease. The extremely high spirituality brought by being a listener always gave him a faint sense of ominousness, yet without a source. The pleasure brought by the phased results obtained from Subject 2 had long disappeared. Gil was about to send a subordinate out to gather some information. Suddenly, his spirituality warned him frantically. Gil's body twisted and stretched impossibly, dodging the flaming spear and golden light cluster that shattered the basement door. Before he could steady himself and shout about an enemy attack, a chilling, icy sensation instantly swept over his entire body, rendering him unable to move. Through the smoke, he saw a pair of pale golden eyes. Gil felt a piercing pain in his brain, as if a dagger was stirring wildly within it, and his consciousness instantly became chaotic. Glenn quickly followed up, not killing him but directly dislocating his limbs, rendering him incapable of resistance. Under the excruciating pain, Gil regained consciousness, but it was too late. His last sight was a continuously enlarging fist. Looking at Gil, who lay on the ground, his body twisted and deformed, already unconscious, the two secret supplicants only recovered from the pervasive, spiritual whip, their expressions instantly changing drastically. What no one noticed was that on bed number 2 in the deepest part of the basement, the previously unconscious Ranveer Us suddenly opened his eyes, which were filled with black lines. His entire body was covered in shadow, and he vanished from the spot. The figures on the other beds seemed to be stimulated, and their forms began to mutate. Aaron and Glenn were about to step forward to finish off the two struggling secret supplicants and then deal with the researchers writhing in pain on the ground. Suddenly, Aaron had a strange feeling that flashed away, and the red moon mark on his wrist also warmed slightly at that instant. Aaron looked solemnly into the depths of the basement. Aaron gestured to Glenn, indicating for him to deal with the two secret supplicants. Smelling the stench of blood wafting from the depths of the basement and feeling the increasingly rich malice, Aaron reached into his pregnant to take out the sun-chasing scepter. Ever since learning from that Aurora Order member that the ultimate goal of this underground experiment was to receive the true Creator's divinity, even though he knew the experiment was far from successful and had produced very few results. Considering the risks involved and its restraining relationship with the sun pathway, Aaron prayed to himself and bestowed the sun-chasing scepter from the Nation of Disorder. Holding the staff, which was comparable to a sealed artifact in a semi-sealed state, Aaron felt the burning sensation in his palm and his body's rejection reaction. He exhaled, and his spirituality began to pour frantically into the staff. The staff, which seemed entirely made of gold, flickered with light, condensing into a ball of scorching white light at its tip. Aaron felt the consumption of his spirituality, his eyes still fixed on the depths of the basement. Suddenly, two shadows were thrown from the deep darkness. Aaron raised a finger and did not easily use the staff. Two beams of light from deep within the sun ring struck the two shadows, sending them flying against the wall. Aaron looked closely and saw that they were two charred lumps of flesh. Even though they were somewhat blackened, one could still vaguely distinguish that they were made of two arms, with protruding finger bones faintly visible. A twisted, massive figure, accompanied by an indescribable roar and emanating shadows, slowly wriggled out from the depths of the basement. Two heads, one male and one female, were strangely twisted and stitched together, both mouths emitting eerie, painful roars. Internal organs were exposed, and bloody tendrils of flesh adhered to the surface like down. The monster's lower body was shrouded in shadow, turning into a dark gray, sticky, unidentifiable fleshy carpet. If Barry Gazar were standing here, he would surely recognize that these two heads were experiment subjects number 1 and number 4. Looking at the monster before him, and the distorted, evil thoughts emanating from the black patterns covering its entire body, Aaron immediately abandoned the idea of letting Astrolfo's vengeful spirit possess him. In this situation, he would only be directly corrupted. The researchers who had been writhing in pain on the ground due to spiritual penetration, suddenly rose with blank expressions after hearing the eerie, painful roars and walked towards the monster. Even the two secret supplicants who were about to be subdued seemed to have their potential unleashed. Their eyes turned blood red, shadows gathered at their feet, and various bizarre abilities were forcefully unleashed. Glenn was temporarily unable to take them down. Aaron activated his spiritual vision and saw even more clearly. A curtain of shadow surged from the black patterns on the monster's body, spreading outwards. And at the center of all the black patterns was a mottled, incomplete seed located on the monster's chest. This product of failed mutation from containing the true Creator's divinity seemed to want to envelop the entire basement. Without hesitation, Aaron risked his spirituality being corrupted and used his remaining spirituality to unleash spiritual penetration, with all his might, striking the monster along with the holy light from the sun ring. The shadows were temporarily dispelled, and the monster's twisted, wriggling figure also paused noticeably due to spiritual penetration. The mottled, incomplete seed on its chest glowed faintly. Seizing the opportunity, Aaron raised the sun-chasing scepter in his hand, activating his spirituality and pointing it remotely at the mottled, incomplete seed on the monster's chest. The scorching white light ball condensed at the tip of the sun-chasing scepter, suddenly solidified and contracted into an extremely pure, scorching white spear, emitting waves of pressure as it shot straight out. The spear of no darkness struck the monster's chest and expanded into a miniature sun bright enough to illuminate the entire basement. Pure, scorching light dispelled the filth and gloom. Waves of hot air carrying a burnt smell swept over, making Aaron's weakened body stumble slightly. The originally expressionless researchers directly fainted on the ground, blown away by the hot air and hitting the wall. Without the monster's boost, the secret supplicants were quickly dealt with by Glenn. Aaron, pale-faced, condensed brilliant light in his palm and picked up the crystalline skull on the ground, which was covered in dark patterns and exuded a strong ominous aura. With a sizzling sound, he placed it into a specially prepared iron box. Aaron felt that his spirituality was almost exhausted, and when he used spiritual penetration to attack the monster, his spirituality inevitably came into contact with the black patterns, thus accumulating a lot of pollution. Without explaining anything to Glenn, Aaron simply gave a few instructions, reminding him to bring the two black-robed individuals from Iron Gate Street back to Military Intelligence Department 9. He quickly exited the basement, came to the corner, Aaron cut his wrist, and a large amount of fresh blood poured into the sun-chasing scepter, calming its side effects. He then did not linger, activated spirit world teleportation, and returned directly to his bedroom. Ignoring Evelyn's coquettishness, Aaron held his aching forehead and entered the partition. After a series of practiced operations, Aaron appeared on the throne in the magnificent palace. He put the sun-chasing scepter back into the pile of miscellaneous items. With the surging dark golden mist, a pure black mist surged from Aaron's body, turning into tiny particles that were crushed and disappeared by the dark golden mist. After quickly clearing the pollution, Aaron, whose spirituality was almost exhausted, immediately returned to reality, exited the partition, and immediately collapsed onto the bed. Just as the monster's chest was struck by the spear of no darkness, in East Backland, in a dark alley a full 8 kilometers away from 112 Torso Street. A dense, pitch-black shadow suddenly expanded and transformed into Ranlis, who had a full forehead, black hair, brown eyes, and wore nearly round glasses. He abruptly stopped, no longer heading to another Aurora Order stronghold guarded by Mr. A, and turned to look in the direction of 112 Torso Street. At this time, Ranlis's eyes were not as pitch-black as when he first awoke in the basement, only his left eye was completely dark without any white, while his right eye gradually returned to normal, revealing cunning and treachery. The black patterns on Ranlis's body also receded and disappeared, and the full black seed that had been integrated into his chest became shriveled. The moment Aaron stepped into the basement, the true creator's divinity, which was sustenance on Ranlis, keenly sensed the aura of the darkness. It actively stripped off part of its power and integrated it into other carriers in the basement, attracting the attention of the person related to the darkness, and forcefully used shadow jumping to leave that basement. It was also because the loss of power was too great, and the part of the divinity that had been integrated into the monster's body was destroyed, leading to a backlash. It was even forced to fall into slumber, no longer able to suppress Ranlis's consciousness. Ranlis's right eye had returned to normal, revealing cunning and sinister intent, and the pitch-black left eye, which previously had no whites, gradually faded. All the black texture converged towards the shriveled seed at his chest, then disappeared without a trace. Ranlis regained control of his body, having fully recalled his experiences during this period. His eyes revealed viciousness and resentment, no longer heading towards Mr. A under the influence of the residual divinity. Ranlis lifted his top to look at his chest but found nothing, yet he clearly felt something had attached itself to his body. His expression grew increasingly gloomy as he turned and hurried towards the Backland Steam Railway Station. In the early morning, at a luxurious villa in Empress Borough, Backland, belonging to the East Tucker family. Aaron rose, pale-faced, and rubbed his slightly swollen forehead, the after-effects of the sun-chasing scepter, absorbing a large amount of blood, and the spiritual depletion from yesterday had subsided. Recalling last night's actions, a somewhat uneasy Aaron got up, changed his clothes, and directly traversed the spirit world to a street corner near MI9. Stepping out of the corner, he tidied his clothes, presented his credentials, walked into the two-story building, and went directly to the 4th Special Investigation Division, where he was surprised to find that the 3 members responsible for perimeter security last night were all injured. After Glenn's explanation, Aaron learned that after they entered the basement last night, a man with a completely black, full forehead, black hair, brown eyes, and nearly round glasses appeared. The 3 members who tried to stop him were all injured, and their mental states were somewhat affected. After confirming that the team members were all fine, Aaron went to the interrogation room not far from the office, where the captured Aurora Order members were held separately. After a night, except for a few who were severely corrupted and had been humanely dealt with, the rest had woken up from the shock and understood their situation. Looking at the freshly bound leaks before him, and recalling the intelligence gained from interrogating the 2 Aurora Order members yesterday, which led to the eradication of the Aurora Order's attempt to accommodate the true creator's divinity, the feedback rapidly digested the interrogator potion. Recalling the dream divination, the meeting between Mr. A and Chunas Kolger, Aaron's eyes flickered, and he immediately began the interrogation, deliberately guiding the direction of questioning. However, to his disappointment, these people knew nothing, and he only managed to extract information about a few small strongholds. According to the first Aurora Order member to surrender, Mr. A had transferred all the informed individuals to participate in a secret operation, which was why the underground laboratory's defenses were so weak. Chunas Kolger picked up the 4th Special Investigation Division's action report and interrogation records with a gloomy expression, and after reading them carefully, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. They did not involve the plan he was responsible for. Closing the report, he pondered for a moment. To prevent the 4th Special Investigation Division from digging deeper and causing a major problem, he heavily red-marked the report. Commend the 4th Special Investigation Division. Furthermore, subsequent investigation of this incident will be taken over by the 1st Special Investigation Division, and the 4th Investigation Division will transfer to the Factory District case. On Wednesday morning, after Aaron put on the death mask and changed his appearance, he went alone to 2 Kings Avenue, West District, the Kingdom Museum. Today was the annual Russell Memorial Exhibition, and although it wasn't the weekend, when Aaron arrived, a long line had already formed at the entrance. At exactly 9 o'clock, Aaron, dressed as a gentleman with a semi-tall silk top hat and a black cane, held his ticket and followed the people in front of him, step by step, into the museum. He did not listen to the guide's explanations. Aaron already knew Russell's life and secrets inside out. His purpose in coming this time was to confirm in advance whether the bookmark containing the blasphemy slate was currently in the Kingdom Museum and its exact location. Quickly heading to the first exhibition hall, he moved through the crowd of visitors. Aaron looked around, searching for Emperor Russell's study, where the book with the bookmark was located. Looking at the velvet blankets, various glass vessels, and the gold-inlaid flushing toilet in the surrounding display cases, as well as the excited expressions on the faces of the surrounding tourists. Aaron had been suppressing his expression until he saw the opened notebook in the display case and the simplified Chinese characters so familiar to him. Aaron's expression finally broke. Although there was no valuable information on it, looking at the somewhat crude complaints and Chunabu remarks, Aaron felt a strange sensation. After pausing for a moment, he composed himself and continued forward. Suddenly, his spirituality subtly pulsed, and Aaron felt a gaze, instinctively turning to look. He saw a woman over 1.7 meters tall standing in front of a display full of what were clearly children's toys and educational textbooks. She wore a white blouse with lace, ribbons, and flowers, paired with a simple dark blue jacket, and beige trousers with black leather boots. She had an old-fashioned black soft hat, with a fine mesh veil hanging down to obscure her face. She had long, waist-length chestnut hair that fell naturally, and her figure was perfectly proportioned, neither fat nor thin. Even with the veil, her deep blue eyes, as if concentrating an ocean, seemed still visible. What made Aaron somewhat silent, however, was that these blue eyes were currently staring at him, seemingly because his intention to search for something upon entering the Kingdom Museum was too obvious, and his abnormal behavior in front of Russell's diary. These things were nothing, at least for other visiting tourists, but for certain people who cared deeply about this matter, they seemed extraordinary. Feeling the oppressive gaze, Aaron could now confirm the woman's identity, Russell's eldest daughter, Queen Mystic Bernadette. However, what made Aaron even more frustrated was that he had already found the location of the restored Emperor Russell's study, and inconveniently, the entrance was not far behind the lady. Aaron hesitated for a moment. Since he had already been noticed, whether he returned the way he came or took a detour, it would only deepen suspicion. So, he simply pretended not to see her gaze and walked straight past. Entering the restored Emperor Russell's study, Aaron clearly felt Bernadette follow him in. He resisted the urge to look back and pretended to stroll indifferently. Finally, in a corner of the study, he found a hardcover book with a bookmark tucked inside. The exposed part of the bookmark depicted childlike scribbles. After a quick glance to confirm the exact location, Aaron walked directly to the Kingdom Museum's evacuation passage. Feeling the gaze seemingly glued to his back, Aaron's mouth twitched, and he headed straight for the Backland Northern District, the Evernite Goddess Church's Backland Diocese headquarters, St. Samuel Cathedral. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Outside a small plaza in front of a purely black church with two symmetrical bell towers, in an uninhabited alley, Bernadette, wearing a slightly old-fashioned soft hat with a fine black veil hanging down, appeared out of thin air. Her azure eyes narrowed slightly as she watched Aaron stride into St. Samuel Cathedral. Even with her immense courage, she wouldn't follow him in at this moment. Originally, she only wanted to see what this person, who had acted strangely at her father's memorial exhibition, would do next. After Aaron's figure disappeared into the church, Bernadette stood silently for a long time, her figure becoming ethereal and barely visible to the naked eye. Feeling the disappearance of that gaze, Aaron, who had already entered the church and was sitting on a black wooden chair, pretended to pray and thought to himself. Given Bernadette's personality, she would never give up easily. I should just teleport away later. Meeting Bernadette at my current sequence 7 level is too risky. If I do meet her, it can't be in my true form. I must maintain a safe distance. Having made up his mind, Aaron looked up at the bishop preaching on the platform and the Evernite holy emblem behind him. He immediately felt a little guilty, quickly sat up straight, performed a complete and standard prayer, then stood up and walked to a nearby offering box, taking out £200 and putting it in. The bishop on duty, with a smile on his face, nodded and drew a crimson moon on his chest, praising, "Praise the goddess, generous sir, you will surely have a good dream tonight." Aaron also returned the gesture with a pious attitude, deliberately revealing the red moon mark on his wrist. The bishop's expression froze slightly, clearly recognizing Aaron. He gave a strange look at the unfamiliar attire before speaking. "Generous sir, please follow me to the back. Someone will continue to explain the sermon to you." Aaron followed the bishop to the area behind the prayer hall. Aaron also removed his mask, returning to his original appearance, and secretly decided never to use that previous face again. The bishop led Aaron to a large door carved with the Evernite holy emblem, then turned and saw Aaron had returned to his original appearance. After a slight surprise, he said, "Your Excellency, Archdeacon Anthony is inside." Aaron nodded slightly, took out a black iron box with strange patterns carved on it from his pocket, and pushed the door open. The air in the room was oppressive. One of the 13 archdeacons of the Evernite Goddess Church, the head of the Backland Diocese, St. Anthony Stevenson, was leaning back in a chair in the middle of the room, his face gloomy, his eyes tightly closed. Aaron's eyesight was excellent. With a slight contraction of his pupils, he saw a telegram on the desk. The renegade Ince Zangwil has appeared in Emmert Port. Red Gloves team. 1 dead, 3 injured. Heads of all dioceses are to intensify search efforts. Hearing the sound, Archdeacon Anthony opened his eyes, and an indescribable sense of oppression emerged. Aaron immediately felt an inner tremor, as if his spirituality was being dominated by fear, or as if he was facing an unknown existence staring at him from the depths of darkness. However, this feeling disappeared in an instant. As expected of a sequence 3 feet horror bishop, Aaron's breathing became erratic for a moment, and he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Archdeacon Anthony's expression softened considerably. He did not conceal anything, pointing to the telegram on the table and saying, "This is a telegram from the cathedral, sent to all dioceses. The cathedral has dispatched one of the 9 senior deacons of the Nighthawks, Sword of the Goddess, Crested Sesima, to pursue Ince Zangwil. This traitor will ultimately pay the price for his blasphemous actions." Aaron bowed his head slightly, silently responding in his heart. It's a pity that Ince Zangwil used that Grade 0 sealed artifact to successfully survive the Evernight Church's pursuit for over 2 years, and he orchestrated the evil god's offspring incident in Tingen City, taking Mr. Fool's first blood. He even fought his way to the door of Nyes in Tingen, stole Saint Serena's ashes, and used it to advance to Sequence 4. Although this was due to the Evernight goddess's transaction with Adam, which meant that Ms. Ariana, the abbess of the Evernight cloister, who held part of the concealed authority and was extremely restrained in her perception of 008, never appeared from beginning to end. But the Evernight goddess and the Evernight church are not equivalent. Some things only the Evernight goddess knows, even the Pope and the abbess of the Evernight cloister are unaware, such as the transaction with Adam, or George III secretly preparing for the ritual of becoming a god. Archdeacon Anthony didn't pay attention to Aaron's contemplation. After speaking, he no longer brought up the traitor, turning instead to Aaron and asking, "Is there something you need this time?" Aaron reined in his wandering thoughts, looked up, and quickly responded. He naturally wouldn't say it was to avoid being tracked by someone, as that would appear too opportunistic, and he did indeed have something to discuss with the archdeacon. Aaron picked up the box in his hand and placed it on the table, informing Archdeacon Anthony about the Aurora Order's attempt to accommodate the true Creator's divinity. He didn't forget to stir the pot by mentioning the way Chunis Kolg of MI9 handled it. Anthony looked at the black box on the table, felt the evil god's divinity contained within, and couldn't help but frown. With a flick of his finger, darkness surged like a tide, engulfing the black box. After becoming part of the tide, it disappeared. Archdeacon Anthony drew a crimson moon on his chest and praised in a low voice, "The goddess will remember your contribution." Seeing that His Excellency the Archdeacon had accepted the box, Aaron coughed lightly, revealed the red moon mark on his wrist, and slowly said, "Archdeacon Anthony, I wish to use the goddess's grace to create a charm that can provide a secretive effect for spirit bodies. I wonder if you can help me." Anthony looked at Aaron without asking further, silently nodded after a moment, and took out a small piece of black gauze of unknown material, saying, "Ordinary materials cannot carry the power of secrecy. This gauze can merge into a spirit body, enhancing its strength. You can attach the power of secrecy to this, and once merged with the spirit body, it will be in a secretive state." After receiving the gauze and chatting for a few minutes, feeling that enough time had passed, Aaron bid farewell and left. When he reached the corner, he put on his mask, deliberately did not enter a secretive state, and initiated a spirit world teleportation. On a bell tower not far from St. Samuel Cathedral, green vines hung down from above, intertwining to form a hammock, upon which Bernadette sat. Suddenly, Bernadette's brow twitched slightly. Her spirituality sensed a fluctuation in the spirit world. As if she had thought of something, she was about to raise her right hand, but seeing St. Samuel Cathedral not far away, she curled her lips and lowered her hand again. The verdant pea vines gradually withered, and Bernadette's figure had long since vanished without a trace. dash 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 dash. Lowen, Southern Dixie Bay, Escasson Port, Southbury Street. The blood moon hung high. Ferran Edis was covered in wounds. The illusory scales beneath the skin of his left arm had been pierced by a dagger, creating a deep wound that exposed the bone. Ferran had long been accustomed to such pain. Ever since he became a folk of rage, over 2 months ago, whenever he became angry, he could unleash attacks far exceeding normal, with greatly enhanced strength, speed, and recovery abilities. Thanks to this, a fierce-looking man lay at Ferran's feet, his prey for the night, a notorious pirate, a sequence 8 inches pugilist. Ferran gradually calmed the anger brought on by the battle. He tied up the unconscious man on the ground, felt the digestion of the folk of rage potion, and secretly rejoiced. Suddenly, applause erupted from the street corner, and a man in a black cloak walked out with a somewhat irritating smile. He appeared to be around 30 years old, with yellowish-brown eyebrows, deep blue yet bright eyes, and not overly sharp features, resembling people from the southern Intis and the Rouen and Segur regions. Felon vigilantly looked up towards the sound of the applause, gripping the axe in his hand, ready for a fight. Under the crimson moonlight, Felon clearly saw the man's appearance and his eyes immediately lit up as he blurted out. "Flame, Danitz, bounty £3,000. As the most prominent adventurer in Escasson Harbor in recent months, he was very interested in pirates with bounties on their heads, both to digest his potion and to raise funds. Especially since rumors had been circulating recently that Vice Admiral Iceberg's Golden Dream had appeared not far from Escasson Harbor, seemingly searching for something. At the previous Chaos Council, Felon, who had only briefly learned about Vice Admiral Iceberg from Mr. Attendant, had specifically gone to research the Golden Dream. He hadn't expected Vice Admiral Iceberg to have such a good reputation among all pirates. Her crew was a pirate band composed of adventurers, but they only plundered merchant and passenger ships when they were particularly poor, and they never harmed innocents, focusing primarily on searching for treasures, making them seem less like pirates and more like treasure hunters. This completely overturned Felon's stereotype of pirates. Only after understanding the conduct of other pirate generals and pirate kings did he realize that Vice Admiral Iceberg's Golden Dream was merely a pirate anomaly. And Felon, who had seen the wanted poster, immediately recognized the man not far away as Danitz, the fourth sailor of Vice Admiral Iceberg, Edwina Edwards S. Golden Dream, with a bounty of £3,000, nicknamed Flame, and also a Sequence 7 pyromaniac of the Hunter Pathway. Originally, Danitz was smugly thinking when the young man opposite recognized him at first glance. "I didn't realize I'm already so famous. When I get back to the ship, I must show off to Ironhide and Bucket and those guys." It wasn't until he heard the £3,000 bounty that his expression darkened. He cleared his throat, not dwelling on these minor issues, and looked at Felon, who was still on guard, chuckling. "Since you've recognized me, I won't waste any more words. I'm here to recruit you on behalf of the Golden Dream." "Recruit?" Felon was stunned. Seeing the confusion on Felon's face, Danitz showed a proud expression, raised his head, and hummed softly, explaining. "As the fourth sailor of the Golden Dream, I naturally have the right to recruit crew members. I've been observing you for 2 days. You can control the frenzy brought by the potion very well, and your temperament is also very suitable. Moreover, you've made too many enemies in Escasson Harbor. If you continue to stay here, you'll only become more and more dangerous. Not everyone will be as friendly as I am." He then showed a confident expression, waiting for the expected excited response, but after waiting for a long time without any reaction, Danitz found Felon still frowning in thought and couldn't help but mutter, "Damn it, why is it always so troublesome when I recruit crew members?" After thinking about Felon's previous hunting activities, he guessed that Felon might be short on money, so he cleared his throat and added, "We don't have weekly wages or annuities, but as long as we find treasure or plunder wealth, it will be distributed according to rank. Under normal circumstances, when luck is good, even the lowest ranking sailor can get £200 to £300 a year. Depending on their rank, there are also different numbers of vacation days each month, but they can only be accumulated and taken at different times. And with your strength, if you perform well, you can at least become the 5th sailor, second only to me, and the captain will also teach you knowledge to help you advance. Upon hearing this, Felon finally looked up from his contemplation and said to Danitz with some hesitation. Thank you for your offer, but I'd like 2 days to consider before giving you an answer. During the previous Chaos Council, he had already learned that the next Sequence 7 was a seafarer, and he had originally planned to go to sea himself to seek opportunities to digest it, but joining the highly reputable Golden Dream seemed to be even more effective. However, out of caution, he still wanted to consult everyone at Friday's Chaos Council, especially Mr. Attendant, before making a decision. Danitz frowned, muttering in a very low voice, "Damn it, I hate trouble the most." He then looked at Felon and raised his voice. "I can't stay here indefinitely. I can give you 2 days. If you decide you want to join, pack your things and come to the dock on Saturday to find the White Gull. I'll come to you." After saying that, he pushed off the ground and vanished without waiting for a response. Dash 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 dash. Aaron rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache as he recalled the day's events in front of the French window. He had been careless. After all, he hadn't expected to encounter Bernadette, and to be noticed by her, and in the end, he could only go to St. Samuel Church to shake off her tail. Aaron's original plan was to set up a ritual in a room near the Kingdom Museum. By summoning himself and responding to himself, he would transform into a spirit world state and infiltrate the Kingdom Museum. Using Klein's original method, he would divert attention, secretly enter the study, and as soon as he got the Black Emperor card, he would immediately end the summoning, return to the room, and then teleport away via the spirit world. But after trying several divination methods with his pendulum in the Nation of Disorder to determine if Bernadette was still in Backland, and getting no results, he decided to modify his original plan out of caution. Aaron decided to hold the ritual directly at home, reducing intermediate steps, so that Bernadette would have no way to investigate. Moreover, the Empress Borough and the West District are very close, and at the speed of a spirit world, it would take at most only 10 minutes to arrive. After obtaining the item that could merge with the spirit world, Aaron, following Archbishop Anthony's teachings, infused it with the power of concealment and roughly estimated the power consumption. With his spirit world strength, which far exceeded that of an ordinary Sequence 7, it was sufficient to provide 2 hours of concealment, enough to cover the duration of the operation. Under the protection of the concealment effect, even if there were many high-sequence powerhouses or some peculiar sealed artifacts in Backland that could monitor certain areas, they would not discover his strange spirit world before the concealment effect disappeared. After thinking for a moment and confirming that there were no omissions in the plan, he glanced at the clock on the wall to confirm the time. He walked into the compartment, took out the thin veil, set up the ritual, and began the ritual of summoning himself and responding to himself. Aaron, still within the spiritual wall, skillfully took out a sandalwood-infused candle and placed it in the center of the desk. Following the procedure, he ignited the candle flame with his spirituality, sprinkling in wisteria, pure dew, and herbal powder, symbolizing order. He watched the flickering flame alternate between dim and bright, and smelled the tranquil and soothing fragrance. Aaron stepped back 2 paces, gazing at the candle on the table, and chanted in ancient Hermes. I summon in my name. The origin and shadow of order, the great emperor of the nation of disorder, the lord of order who controls rules. In an instant, the constantly flickering dim yellow candlelight and the tranquil, soothing fragrance intertwined and merged into an illusory vortex, a vortex that frantically absorbed spirituality. By the time Aaron finished chanting the incantation, the vortex had solidified into a palm-sized ring of dark golden mist. After a few glances, with no doubt whatsoever, Aaron quickly sank his consciousness, returning to the nation of disorder. Immediately, he saw circles of dark golden light ripples spreading from the throne deep within the palace, making the complex pattern carved behind the throne, a balance representing order and a scepter symbolizing dominion, appear even more solemn and majestic. Aaron took a breath, stabilized his mind through meditation, and reached out to touch the target. Almost simultaneously, he heard the summoning incantation he had just chanted, and saw the surging spirituality and ripple-like light patterns merge and stretch out an illusory door. Feeling the consumption of his spirituality, Aaron concentrated his mind and gave a strong push of intention. Once again passing through layers of dark golden mist and illusory murmurs, Aaron opened his eyes again and saw himself sitting with closed eyes before the altar, with the ring of dark golden mist in front of him. Aaron withdrew his gaze, raised his right hand, and activated his own spiritual body, which was mixed with some dark golden mist power. Whoosh! A slightly chilly wind picked up, swirling around the bedroom. The black gauze with the red moon symbol next to the altar flew up and merged into Aaron's spiritual body. A slightly cold sensation quickly spread throughout his body, yet it made his spiritual body more stable and his thoughts clearer. Aaron pondered for a moment, used the dark golden mist to condense a mask over his face, then no longer hesitated, slipped into the nearby mirror, and left the villa. Finding a random exit, he left the mirror world. Aaron oriented himself, and flew rapidly towards the Kingdom Museum in the West District. On a street corner in the West District, a thin, small boy, no more than 7 or 8 years old, sitting on the ground, looked up in a certain direction, a silver gleam flashing in his eyes, as if an illusory silver ring appeared. A moment later, he mumbled softly, "So it's a favored one of the night. Is a spiritual body really that bold?" He then boredly flipped through the tarot cards in his hand, and a moment later, 3 tarot cards lay flat on the ground, face up. In the middle was the Judgment card, with the Star card and the Wheel of Fortune card on its left and right, respectively. The little boy raised an eyebrow slightly and drew a 4th tarot card from beneath the middle Judgment card. The card face showed an emperor wearing a crown seated on a throne. It was the Emperor card. He gently placed the Emperor card below the Judgment card, and looking at the 4 tarot cards in front of him, the little boy murmured softly, "It's really getting more and more interesting. Dash 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 dash. No. 2 Kings Boulevard, Kingdom Museum." On the polygonal hip roof, 4 security personnel in overcoats stood, enduring the night wind, carefully scrutinizing their respective directions. Once someone approached the museum, even with the cover of trees and building shadows, it would be difficult to escape their eyes. Inside the museum, the remaining security personnel were divided into 4 groups, patrolling the various exhibition halls at intervals along different routes. In the exhibition hall where Russell's diary was kept, Max Livermore, the captain of the machinery hivemind team, wearing his monocle that allowed him to see wraiths, phantoms, and other spiritual monsters, carried a hurricane lamp and conducted patrols, occasionally stepping out to confirm the situation elsewhere. On a street corner near the Kingdom Museum, a slightly illusory spiritual body with mysterious patterns on its surface appeared. Aaron looked at the Kingdom Museum nearby, carefully sensing his own state in the surrounding environment. In his spiritual form, Aaron more clearly felt a subtle connection between himself and a certain place that was infinitely high yet infinitely close. His spiritual intuition told him that by following this connection and giving a strong intention to end the summoning, his spiritual body would immediately disappear and return to the ritual room. Aaron maintained his hidden state, following the shadows, following routes difficult to be observed, passing through tree carvings, passing through obstacles, and flying directly into the museum's 2nd floor exhibition hall. In the room where the machinery hivemind team was located, a pile of colorful building blocks on a nearby glass display case formed a miniature map of the museum's 1st floor. This was a sealed artifact controlled by the god of steam and machinery church. As long as those deformable building blocks formed the corresponding building, they could establish a connection with the real object. If someone intruded, a miniature reaction would immediately appear on it. Max Livermore, the captain of the machinery hivemind team, walked back with his hurricane lamp and stood beside Russell's diary, his brows tightly furrowed. Just now, a faint sense of unease had suddenly welled up in his heart. He looked back at the sealed artifact in the display case, stared at it for a moment, and then withdrew his gaze after finding no abnormalities. Aaron silently entered the second floor, passing through wall after wall, flying towards the restored study. Standing at the door, he felt no other auras. He floated through the door, taking in the entire scene of that area's various corners. All normal, Aaron mumbled, then half flew to land in front of Russell's desk, which was covered in glass. He glanced around, then without hesitation, simultaneously reached out his hands, directly grabbing the bookmark within the creative manuscript. Only after he touched the bookmark and enveloped it within his spiritual body did the study undergo a change. Wah, wah, wah. Loud, piercing baby cries suddenly echoed throughout the exhibition hall. They were so illusory, as if coming from a very, very distant place. Black cracks opened one after another, and strange, grotesque eyeballs protruded into midair, densely packed, coldly and indifferently staring at Aaron. Pea vines hung down from the ceiling, intertwining into a dense forest, submerging the original study. Bernadette, wearing a white shirt with lace and ribbon flowers on the upper body, beige trousers, black leather boots, and an old-fashioned black soft hat, sat on a swing entwined with pea vines. Her chestnut hair fell naturally, and her deep blue eyes were fixed on the display stand where the bookmark had disappeared, staring intently at the seemingly empty, figureless display stand. Bernadette pursed her lips, and strange runes appeared in her blue eyes, making them even deeper. This was the eye of peeping, used by a Sequence 3 clairvoyant. It was a deep darkness. Enduring the slight stinging sensation in her eyes, Bernadette stared intently at the empty space and finally saw a strange spirit with a dark golden mask. Aaron watched Bernadette activate her eye of peeping, but he didn't panic. The blasphemy slate was already in his hand, and he could end the summoning and return to his room at any time, giving him the confidence to face Bernadette. Moreover, apart from the instinctive warning against high-sequence powerhouses, his spiritual intuition didn't detect any killing intent. He also wanted to establish contact with Bernadette, reach an agreement, and maintain an understanding on certain matters. Aaron changed to a comfortable posture, gathering most of the remaining dark golden mist power and hidden power within his spirit onto the mask, ensuring that the eye of peeping couldn't see through it for a short period. Then, to show his sincerity, Aaron voluntarily lifted some of his hidden state and revealed his form. Bernadette narrowed her eyes as she looked at the strange spirit that had appeared before her. She stared at the dark golden mask on him for a while, but gained nothing except an increasingly stinging sensation. Being in Backland, she didn't dare to activate her mythical creature state to further enhance the ability of her eye of peeping. After gaining nothing, she stopped dwelling on it. Looking at the strange spirit before her, who was casual in his demeanor and seemed to have no fear, Bernadette frowned almost imperceptibly. Her soft yet emotionless voice rang out. "Why did you take that bookmark? Who is behind you?" Seeing that Aaron didn't respond, her voice rang out again, this time with a hint of sternness within its softness. The bloodshot eyeballs around them rapidly expanded, seemingly wanting to occupy the entire space. "Why did you only take the bookmark? How did you know to take the bookmark?" Aaron used the special nature of his spirit to alter his voice, asking back in a slightly neutral tone, "Bernadette Gustave." Although it was a question, it was full of certainty. Then, he paused and said 3 words in Chinese, "Huang Beibei." Upon hearing the first half of the sentence, Bernadette was only slightly surprised, until she heard the 3 strange words with peculiar pronunciations. A memory hidden deep in the ocean of her mind surfaced. These 3 pronunciations were exactly the same as those her father often mumbled when she was a child, and after she became an adult, her father never mentioned them again. It was only after she became a demigod that she used her abilities to retrieve the syllables from her memory and firmly engrave them in her heart, as a place of belonging. A wave of suppressed emotion surged forth. The bloodshot eyeballs immediately began to mutate, even shattering, and the aura raged. The machinery hivemind team guarding the area finally discovered the anomaly and rushed up. Sensing the commotion downstairs, Aaron didn't explain or answer the previous questions. Instead, he softly chanted in ancient Hermes. The origin of order and shadows. The great emperor of the nation of disorder. The lord of order who wields rules. Bernadette's gaze slightly narrowed as she chewed on this honorific name. Her eyes darkened, and she quickly said, "The Holy Spirit who pursues knowledge. The tower of the mysterious world. The eye that peeks into fate. The king above the sea. The Holy Bernadette Gustave." Aaron nodded slightly, performed a standard etiquette, and communicated with the nation of disorder through his will, ending the ritual. A vast and terrifying suction force came, and Aaron's transparent, almost invisible figure instantly disappeared from the material world, along with the vanished bookmark. Since she was already exposed, Bernadette no longer hid. Pure white, illusory feathers condensed on her back, revealing her incomplete mythical creature form. She fully activated her eye of peeping, wanting to see where the spirit had gone. A few seconds later, Bernadette, having gained nothing, shook her head in disappointment. Her figure vanished without a trace, and the surrounding vines and eyeballs also turned into colorful foam and disappeared. Captain Max hurried to the study door, gritted his teeth, and told his teammates to stand far away and report the matter to the church. He then pushed open the door, but it was empty inside. Dash 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 dash. Inside the magnificent palace, enveloped in dark golden mist, Aaron's figure suddenly appeared on the throne. The mask on his face gradually disappeared, and in his hand was a bookmark depicting Emperor Russell. Aaron smiled with satisfaction, and in a low voice, he uttered the corresponding ancient Fessic syllables, Bernadette. The bookmark in his hand sank slightly, generating an invisible vortex that frantically absorbed Aaron's spirit. On the bookmark, a clear light slowly rose, and the image of Emperor Russell on the outside was renewed. He sat on an ancient stone throne, wearing a black crown inlaid with various gems. He wore dark armor, covered by a cloak of the same color, holding a scepter in his hand, his eyes looking forward indifferently. In the upper left corner of the bookmark, brilliant starlight condensed into a line of text. Sequence 0, Black Emperor. The Black Emperor card floated in the air, slowly rotating. The surrounding dark golden mist seemed to be drawn, gradually gathering to form a small vortex. An irresistible urge rose in Aaron's heart. He grabbed the Black Emperor card, and as soon as it connected with his spirit, the boundless dark golden mist seemed to gather into waves and strong winds, forming a majestic armor on his body. A dark crown appeared on his head, and a long cloak of the same color appeared behind him. Lines imbued with divinity also immediately appeared on the armor. A feeling never before experienced emerged, and his connection and control over the nation of disorder were stronger than ever. Aaron opened his eyes, his pupils becoming a mixture of gold and black. He slightly raised his palm, and the dark golden mist gathered in the palace to form a magnificent dark golden figure. The dark golden figure grew pair after pair of huge, dark wings covered with golden patterns on his back, a full 12 pairs. And on each pair of wings were feathers inscribed with numerous mysterious symbols, alternating between light and dark. Gold and black formed a stark contrast. The gigantic figure, under Aaron's command, spread its wings, covering the wide dome of the majestic palace. Dash 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 dash. Inside the Kingdom Museum, in the restored study, Machinery Hivemind, team leader Max Livermore reported with a serious expression, "Only one bookmark has been confirmed stolen." As he spoke, he secretly glanced at the important figure standing in front of the desk, with his back to him. That was an old man wearing a white priest's robe and a soft cap for clergy. He was Horamik Haydn, the head of the Backland Diocese of the God of Steam and Machinery Church, and a member of the Pre-God Council, Archbishop. His hands were behind his back, holding an ancient patterned silver mirror. On each side of the mirror were eye-like decorations with black gems as their base, looking deep and enchanting. Max's pupils slightly contracted, recognizing this infamous sealed artifact, 2 to 111. Horamik had a very gentle and kind face, looking like a highly learned elder. At this moment, he also showed no trace of anger. He withdrew his gaze, looked around, and said, "Moreover, there was more than one person here last night. There were at least two, divided into two opposing sides. One of them might even have a higher sequence than I do, but the other side strangely escaped. Although I cannot restore the complete scene, some things can still be seen. Things are more complicated than we imagined." Speaking of this, he handed the silver mirror in his hand to Deacon Ekenzer Bernard, who was beside him, and then sighed, "I also know why they stole the bookmark. We have been deceived by Russell for over 150 years. There's no need to ask about the bookmark's whereabouts anymore. You can ask who the opposing parties were." Ekenzer Bernard's brown hair was always messy, stubbornly sticking out, and even the hat he wore couldn't hide it. He took the silver mirror with a slightly stiff expression, nodded, then, unwilling to give up, looked back at his teammates behind him who were lowering their heads, pretending not to hear. He sighed and, resignedly, raised the silver mirror in his hand. He looked at the silver mirror in his hand, stroked its surface 3 times with his right palm, paused for 2 seconds, and Ekenzer took a deep breath, saying in a deep voice, "Respected Rhodes, my question is, who were the participants in the events that just occurred in this place?" The surrounding darkness suddenly became hazy, and ripples of water light spread across the silver mirror's surface. Soon, a scene emerged within the silver mirror. In Russell's restored study, thick green pea vines hung everywhere, and bloodshot eyeballs emerged from black cracks. The figure of a lady appeared, dressed in a white shirt with lace and ribbon flowers on the upper body, beige trousers, black leather boots, and an old-fashioned black soft hat. Opposite her was a phantom figure, so blurry that only a vague outline could be seen. As the water light fluctuated, and the machinery hivemind team members were about to see the next scene, the original image suddenly disappeared and no longer reappeared. The few people looked at each other, utterly bewildered. Just as Ekenzer was about to ask for the opinions of his teammates and Archbishop Horamik, several lines of blood-red ancient Fursic words suddenly appeared on the silver mirror. "According to the principle of reciprocity, it is my turn to ask. If you answer error, or lie, you will be punished." These lines were blood-red, as if still dripping liquid. As a deacon who frequently used sealed artifact, 2-111, he clearly knew that this mirror had living characteristics and a considerably high level of intelligence. And from the color of the font alone, he felt the mirror's anger. Unaware of the reason, he merely attributed it to the sealed artifact's occasional madness. Ekenzer's expression first twisted, then became extremely solemn. Immediately after, water light shimmered on the silver mirror, and a new line of blood-red words appeared. "Who is the object for whom you gave your all, tried your best to please, but only received the outcome of being discarded?" Ekenzer was stunned, feeling all of his teammates' gazes on him, and even the kind-faced Archbishop Horamik inadvertently glanced over. With a buzzing sound, Ekenzer's face first lost its color, then turned crimson. This question both pierced a hidden wound deep within his heart and left him at a loss. If he said who it was. Ekenzer swallowed hard, imagining the possible scenarios, closed his eyes in pain, and said in a desolate tone, "I choose punishment." A bolt of lightning immediately struck, but unlike before, it was no longer silvery white, it was tinged with a hint of blood red. It struck Ekenzer directly on the head, making his hair stand on end and reflecting the color of the lightning. He shook violently like rolling dice, as if he had been given a hallucinogenic drug. Archbishop Horamik sighed, closed his eyes, recalling the previous scene, and muttered to himself, "Queen Mystic Bernadette, and a phantom, eerie figure." Max Livermore, the captain of the machinery hivemind squad, looked at Deacon Ekenzer, who was still trembling, with a clear struggle in his expression, but ultimately stepped forward. After all, regardless of whether a high-sequence powerhouse had acted, the church had lost an important item this time, and he was largely to blame. He was also willing to contribute to the investigation. Taking the mirror from Deacon Ekenzer's still trembling hand, Max stroked its surface 3 times with his right palm, paused for 2 seconds, swallowed with difficulty, and said in a deep voice, "Respected Erodes, my question is, who exactly was the phantom figure in front of that lady just now?" As soon as he finished speaking, no text or image appeared on the mirror's surface. A silvery white bolt of lightning materialized out of thin air and struck Max's head. Max's hair stood straight up, and his body fell with a thud, with some black smoke rising from him. However, the mirror did not fall with him. Instead, it floated up on its own and landed on the table. Shouldn't it display the image first, then answer the question, and only then punish? The surrounding machinery hivemind squad members looked at each other, bewildered, and hastily helped their captain to a nearby chair. After 2 seconds, Max shakily stood up, leaning on the chair, trembling and gasping for breath. Archbishop Horamic's eyes narrowed. He beckoned and drew the silver mirror to him, questioning it personally, but the silver mirror no longer reacted, like a dead object. As the head of the Backland diocese, Horamic knew this magic mirror well. It was a living sealed artifact. Although its personality was poor, it would follow its own rules and answer questions normally. Unless, the matter being asked touched upon existences of extremely high status, causing the magic mirror to choose to passively resist. Horamic was silent for a long while, then handed the magic mirror to Deacon Ekenzer, who had regained his composure. The latter quickly covered the magic mirror with a black cloth and placed it into a box inscribed with complex symbols, entirely made of gears. What no one noticed was that after the box closed, the magic mirror, which had previously looked like an ordinary mirror, showed 3 lines of pale text on its fluctuating surface. The origin of order and shadow. The great emperor of the kingdom of chaos. The lord of order who wields rules. Immediately, a faint, dark gold mist spread across the mirror's surface, concealing and making everything disappear. Dash 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 dash. Backland, West District, 9 East Velas Street, Earl Mistral's residence. Red moonlight streamed through the window. Under the bright lamplight, a lady with black hair and red eyes sat at her desk, carefully examining the open book before her, A General History of the Northern Continent's Fifth Epoch. This was a book personally recorded and written by a prominent figure within the Sanguine. The copy in front of Louise Sills was naturally just a reproduction, but even so, it could only be borrowed within the Earl's residence. Ordinary Sanguine could not see it at all. A comprehensive history of the Northern Continent in the Fifth Epoch meticulously records the more significant events that have occurred in the Northern Continent's nations since the Fifth Epoch. It begins with the Northern Continent's governance by the 7 Orthodox deities and the 4 nations of Loan, Fasak, Intis, and Fanapotter Kingdom, and concludes in 1198 with Russell's assassination and demise at White Maple Palace. It documented events including the 20 Years' War between the Loan Kingdom and the Fasak Empire, and the White Rose War between Loan and the Intis Empire. It also recorded the conflict in which all nations of the Northern Continent participated, and all accused each other of betraying the sacred oath from the end of the Fourth Epoch. Thus this 5-year conflict was called the War of Betrayal. It continued to record until Russell, as regent, promoted reforms, established an empire and declared himself emperor, until his demise. The War of Betrayal occupied the most space, and as a Sanguine born in the Fanapotter Kingdom, Louise often heard of Sanguine being forced to join the Earth Mother Church. Therefore, she harbored some animosity towards the Earth Mother Church, always feeling that the Earth Mother was encroaching upon the authority of the ancestor. Despite her dislike, she was extremely interested in the War of Betrayal, in which the Earth Mother Church personally participated. Thanks to the significant increase in her spirituality after her advancement, Louise silently memorized several pages of content, intending to share her knowledge at this week's Chaos Council. Dash 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 dash. On Friday evening, Aaron sat upon the throne. The Black Emperor card was placed face down on the left armrest of the throne. Aaron discovered that as a blasphemy slate corresponding to one of the 2 pathways of the Nation of Disorder, even if it wasn't integrated into his spiritual body, he could still use it to elevate his status and mobilize more dark golden mist. Feeling that the time was right, Aaron returned to the position where Mr. Dependence should be. He raised his right hand, and 4 figures immediately appeared on the stone chairs below. After the customary greetings, Ferran Edis spoke first, exchanging £750 for the sequence 7 Seafarer potion formula. He quickly glanced at the materialized parchment. Main ingredient, 100 milliliters of ghost shark blood. After memorizing the formula, Ferran quietly waited for the discussion session, contemplating whether to follow Danitz and join the Golden Dream. Sid Watson had just advanced to Gravedigger last week, and Chuck Wald had just crossed the raging sea. Knowing that a demigod was accompanying him, he dared not easily use the sacrifice and bestowal rituals, and could only participate in the meeting by being passively pulled in this way, so he had no urgent needs. Seeing that no one continued to propose transactions, Louise thought for a moment and then spoke, sharing the content of the War of Betrayal from A Comprehensive History of the Northern Continent in the 5th Epic, excluding the Sanguine Secrets. She successfully captivated everyone's attention. Although Aaron knew the general content and outcome of the War of Betrayal, it was the first time he had understood the war that involved all the nations of the Northern Continent over 600 years ago in such detail. Listening to Louise's account, which subtly contained prejudice against the Earth Mother Church, Aaron couldn't help but find it amusing. He hoped this lady wouldn't be too ashamed when Lilith revealed her identity. However, upon re-evaluating the War of Betrayal, many doubts arose. The War of Betrayal, in the 5th Epic, was publicly declared to have been caused by disputes between the Knowledge Church and the Earth Mother Church for certain reasons, and the nations believed the reason was the struggle for believers. However, this reason was somewhat far-fetched. The Knowledge Church only accepted academic elites, or at least those who were relatively intelligent, and it was unlikely to have conflicts over believers that required war to resolve. Moreover, the God of Knowledge and Wisdom and the Earth Mother were not from similar pathways, and there was no fundamental contradiction between them. Even the LotM kingdom could accommodate 3 Orthodox deity churches to preach, let alone the Phaenopater kingdom, which originally only had 2 Orthodox deity churches. After all, the Earth and Wisdom pathways did not require a life-and-death struggle, and war would also cause instability in their anchors, leading to problems in the true God states. In this situation, they could still fight, which itself indicated that the benefits of this war to them were far greater than the short-term impact, which is why the 2 major Orthodox deity churches acted that way. Combined with the world war that would happen a few years later, after Phaenopater declared war on LotM, it instead directly attacked Leuenberg. Assuming Leuenberg had not gained independence from the War of Betrayal, then at that time, there was no doubt that both major Orthodox deity churches of Phaenopater would have joined the camp attacking LotM. LotM would have been attacked from both north and south, and the fence-sitting god of steam and machinery would only have switched sides faster, leading to a 5-2 imbalance in the number of deities. With such a significant disadvantage, even with the contingency of Lilith disguised as Ombella, who could turn traitor at a critical moment, there might not have been an opportunity to use it. But after the War of Betrayal, Leuenberg became independent, and Phaenopater's main firepower was suddenly drawn to Leuenberg, even incidentally tying up Intis. LotM only needed to face Phaesac and Intis, and the power balance between the true gods was not disrupted, remaining in a stalemate until the god of steam and machinery eventually switched sides, causing an overt imbalance in true god power, which then triggered the final god war. And the god of steam and machinery and the eternal blazing sun did not appear on the final battlefield, most likely because they were facing the Lord of Storms and the god of knowledge and wisdom. Therefore, combining the subsequent developments in the following years and the analysis of the God War, Aaron believes that the War of Betrayal was very likely a collaboration between Hariburgen and Lilith, deliberately staged for the god of combat, to lay out a plan for the subsequent world war. And for Hariburgen, a member of the dragon race, to survive the ancient sun god's purge of the ancient gods and become one of the 8 king of angels, the wisdom angel, clearly demonstrates his cunning and stratagem. After the ancient sun god's demise, Hariburgen further advanced to become the god of knowledge and wisdom, wielding omniscience, insight, and prophecy. Thinking of this, Aaron recalled more details, his eyebrows subtly moving. When son Derek Berg and Moon Emlyn White debated the origin of the City of Silver's faith, Hermit Catlia provided crucial information. Umbella is suspected to have fallen in the late Second Epoch. And this information was clearly obtained from the Hidden Sage. Since the Hidden Sage, who controls the authority of prying into secrets, knows some secrets, it means that this secret is not so hidden that only Lady Evernight and the Earth Mother know it. Besides Adam, only the God of knowledge and wisdom, who holds the authority of omniscience, insight, and prophecy, could possibly know. As for why the God of steam and machinery, who also covers part of the authority of knowledge, knew nothing, leading him to become a fence-sitter in the end, Aaron has a guess. The God of steam and machinery's partial authority over knowledge leans more towards creation than prying into secrets or omniscience. Coupled with the fact that he advanced to Sequence 0 Paragon too late and was not well informed about many historical secrets, and his advancement was too hasty, the potion was not fully digested. It wasn't until Russell promoted the steam revolution that he truly reached his peak strength. And the God of knowledge and wisdom, who already knew the secret, secretly joined the alliance of Evernight and Earth, using their respective authorities to conceal the original secret. They used the War of Betrayal to set up independence in advance, helping the Evernight goddess share some pressure from the Phaenopoter and Intis directions, while also reducing the loss of anchors on the Phaenopoter and Loan border. But how did the God of knowledge and wisdom and the Earth Mother deceive the God of combat? The excuse of competing for believers could at most deceive the common people and church members, but it could never deceive a true God. So what was the reasonable war reason that could make the God of combat believe it? Aaron leaned back in his high-backed chair, his eyes sweeping over Louise, who was still speaking voluminously, and two terms gradually emerged in his mind: apothecary pathway, planter pathway. Louise, who had been speaking voluminously, suddenly felt Mr. Keeper's gaze fixed on her. Her voice immediately faltered, and after a moment of hesitation, seeing Mr. Keeper shift his gaze, she deliberated for a bit before continuing her narration. Aaron withdrew his gaze and fell into thought. At the end of the Second Epoch, Lilith, the sanguine ancestor, faked her death to escape, then switched her pathway and assumed the identity of Umbella, the giant queen. To make other ancient gods believe that she had perished, Lilith must abandon the moon uniqueness and the sequence 1-inch beauty goddess, Beander characteristic. As a mad ancient god, Lilith most likely possessed two portions of the beauty goddess, Beander characteristic plus one portion of another sequence 1 Beander characteristic. Aaron suddenly had a flash of inspiration, recalling the scene Hermit Catlia saw when she advanced to sequence 4 inches mysticologist. In the high sky, there were moons of different colors, some blood red, some silvery white, some dark brown, and some quiet blue, like eyes gazing down at the earth. The 4 moons Catlia saw should be a Beander meaningful manifestation of the moon pathway's uniqueness and the 3 portions of the sequence 1-inch beauty goddess, Beander characteristics. The red moon symbolizes the portion of the moon pathway uniqueness held by the Evernight goddess. The silver moon should be the sequence 1-inch beauty goddess, Beander characteristic in Lilith's possession. During the encirclement and suppression of Shaman King Karaman, Emlyn White used Lilith's ring to cast summoning door, while Lilith subtly influenced the real world through the silver moon. The brown moon should correspond to the sequence 1 in the mother tree of desire's possession, as that outer deity appeared with brownish branches piercing the bound god. She controlled the high sequence Beander characteristics of the moon pathway, gaining partial authority over the moon, and lured Beyonders who believed in the primordial moon to join the Rose school of thought. And the blue star symbolizes rationality, communication, neutrality, corresponding to the god of knowledge and wisdom. The final blue moon is very likely in the hands of the god of knowledge and wisdom. If this is the case, then the Earth Mother's demand for the adjacent pathway's moon sequence 1-inch beauty goddess, characteristic from the god of knowledge and wisdom, which led to the Battle of Oaths, is a reason sufficient to convince the god of combat. Aaron, whose thoughts were gradually clearing, reined in his scattered thoughts and suddenly noticed that Louise, who had been narrating, had stopped. The gazes of several people, not daring to look at the great existence on the throne, were all fixed on him, with a hint of expectation. Aaron cleared his throat and, looking at Louise with a calm tone, said, "The Battle of Oaths you just mentioned reminded me of some secrets and conjectures, but those are not things you can know at present." Seeing Louise's slight disappointment, Aaron thought for a moment and continued. "However, I can give you a suggestion. You can carefully learn about the doctrines of the Earth Mother Church, without prejudice. Perhaps you will have an unexpected harvest." Seeing that Mr. Keeper was no longer speaking, Farron quickly spoke up, informing everyone at the gathering that Vice Admiral Iceberg's fleet, the Golden Dream, had appeared in the waters near the raging sea to Dixa Bay, searching for a certain item. Finally, he concisely recounted his encounter with Flame Danitz, the fourth sailor of the Golden Dream, and then, in a consulting tone, detailed Danitz's attempt to recruit him. Cheekwald frowned, recalling the task Bishop Montella had given him to read books every day on the ship. He had seen records about Vice Admiral Iceberg in one of those books. After thinking about the overly positive descriptions and evaluations of Vice Admiral Iceberg in the book Bishop Montella gave him, Cheek said, "Vice Admiral Iceberg is enthusiastic about teaching others, almost answering every question. This is both her style and her hobby. She has both ideas and initiative, and she likes to show off her collection. She has a strong thirst for knowledge and enjoys exchanging knowledge with people." Through layers of mist, he looked at the surprised expressions of the other members of the gathering, seemingly finding such an evaluation appearing on a pirate general somewhat incongruous. Cheek's mouth twitched, and he added, "This is a record I saw in a book from the Church of the God of Wisdom and Knowledge." As everyone had different thoughts, Aaron was wondering if the item Vice Admiral Iceberg was looking for was the key to opening the Giant King's court. Was this an adventure stemming from her own initiative, or was it sanctioned by the Church of the God of Wisdom and Knowledge? Recalling Grossel's Travels, a book deeply connected to the world within the book and the spectator pathway, Aaron narrowed his eyes and said, "That Vice Admiral Iceberg indeed comes from the Church of the God of Wisdom and Knowledge. She is their secret force developed on the sea. Their style of action is quite rigorous. They will not commit acts like massacring innocents and will not go against your true nature. Moreover, she has something I am interested in. You can join the Golden Dream as a medium for our communication." Although everyone was curious about what Mr. Keeper was interested in, they dared not ask further. Seeing that no one else was speaking, Sid raised his hand. He had recently become a sequence 8 inches gravedigger, and had also demonstrated his strength within the numinous episcopate, becoming a sequence 9 inches corpse collector, officially becoming an internal member of the numinous episcopate. He had recently received a new mission, to assist in the search for 2 defectors from the Rose School of Thought, one named Sharon and the other Marich. After gaining approval, Sid materialized portraits of the 2 within the gathering. Even though none of them were in the southern continent, they all silently committed the faces to memory. The Rose School of Thought's person in charge of pursuing the defectors was a sequence 5 inches wraith, who had reached some agreement with the numinous episcopate's high-ranking members to assist in the pursuit. According to Sid's account, the original pursuit was only in the Stars Plateau, with a smaller scope and scale, known only to the high-ranking members of the Rose School of Thought. But ever since a little over a month ago, the Rose School of Thought suddenly began an unbridled search, and they are recently about to arrive at Caesar Harbor. Aaron raised an eyebrow, thinking to himself, "Sharon, defecting from the Rose School of Thought. It must be that Ms. Rynette Tinacare was killed by Saar, and she hasn't been reborn in the spirit world yet. The hedonist faction of the Rose School of Thought has completely taken control of the situation." Aaron did not ask Sid to do anything. Under the oppression of the hedonist faction, anything a sequence 8 inches gravedigger did would be akin to a moth flying into a flame. After a period of silence, everyone's gaze gathered on the dark golden card placed face down on the left end of the throne. That position had never held an item before. What kind of item could be placed so close by such a hidden existence? Although they all saw the longing in the eyes of the members, no one spoke up. Aaron even noticed Louise constantly glancing at him. To continue the performance, he had to direct it himself. Aaron bowed towards the throne and said, "Great Lord of Order, may we know the origin of that item beside you?" A soft tapping sound echoed. Aaron, enduring the shame in his heart, manipulated the magnificent figure on the throne and slowly spoke. "This is a blasphemy slate, the Black Emperor card, from a sacrifice made by another keeper." Cards of blasphemy. The legendary cards made by Russell that contain the secrets to becoming a god. Louise and Czech felt a tremor in their hearts and couldn't help but blurt it out. Sid and Ferran, who had been somewhat confused, widened their eyes when they heard, "Secrets to becoming a god." In this strange atmosphere, Aaron controlled the figure on the throne to end the gathering. Dash 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 dash. Louise opened her eyes. She had recovered from the shock of just learning about the cards of blasphemy and began to ponder. This Black Emperor card was sacrificed by other deer of the Great Lord of Order. This is enough to show that his influence has spread throughout the real world, secretly affecting the world's trajectory. Why did Mr. Deer tell me to pay more attention to the Earth Mother Church? What signal does this represent? Dash 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 dash. Czech sat at his desk and slowly opened his eyes. What met his gaze was a mountain of books, and a test paper with a score of 68, placed in the most prominent position, which he had just received last week. It was also the first time he had passed Bishop Montella's exam in over a month since he went to sea. Czech looked away from the desktop, towards the red moon outside the window, his left hand clenched, and his right hand reached into his arms, touching the iron box containing his father's inherited Sequence 7 Pyromaniac Deander characteristic. He whispered to himself, "Cards of blasphemy, the secret to becoming a god." Dash 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 dash. On Saturday morning, Ferran arrived at the dock early. After several inquiries, he still couldn't find the white gull. Just as he thought he might have been tricked by Danitz. A man in a hood quietly approached him, walked up close, and lightly coughed, saying, "You finally thought it through and are willing to join our golden dream." Hearing the slightly familiar voice, Ferran put away the short dagger in his sleeve, recognized the newcomer, and opened his mouth in surprise. "Danitz." Danitz's expression immediately changed. After looking around, he said in a slightly displeased low voice, "Damn it. Keep your voice down, do you want everyone to know? Recently, many pirate generals have been interested in our captain's expedition, and many are eager to move. Although we are not afraid of trouble, we cannot cause trouble for the captain due to foolish actions, understand?" Ferran looked at Danitz in the hood in front of him, and he always had an urge to go up and punch him, but he quickly suppressed it, only replying indifferently, "You can't beat them, right? After all, Vice Admiral Iceberg's bounty is among the lower ones among the pirate generals." Danitz immediately jumped up, his voice rising in anger. "Damn it, you fool who only sees bounties. Our captain is the strongest pirate general. It's just because our captain never kills innocent people indiscriminately, only pursues treasures, that his bounty is less than the other pirate generals, understand?" Startled by Danitz's somewhat intense reaction, Ferran had to cover Danitz's mouth to quiet him down. Danitz snorted and said, "Kid, once you join the Golden Dream, you need to know what to say and what not to say. Let's go, we'll take the seagull to the gathering place." Ferran paused, then asked with a hint of confusion, "The seagull?" Danitz turned back and chuckled, his mockery evident. "Of course it's the seagull. The white gull was just a cover. How could I foolishly tell you my location directly? What if you brought spies from some faction? So, of course, I had to observe you." Looking at the smile on Danitz's face, Ferran's fists involuntarily clenched again. Dash 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 dash. Empress Burrow, Backland, the luxurious villa of the East Tucker family. Aaron sat in the bedroom, with Evelina, who had become a Sequence 8 telepathist, seated to one side. Both pairs of eyes looked at Darren in front of the desk. Darren Sherall, who had accumulated enough contributions and was promoted to sequence 6 faceless last week, stood with a strange expression. He always felt uncomfortable under the gaze of that white cat. Looking at those silver eyes, it was as if he had been stripped naked and placed in front of a cat, with no secrets to hide. Aaron put down the documents in his hand, nodded slightly, and said with a smile, breaking the awkward atmosphere. "You've done very well. The rest of the work can be left to me. I will assign you an even more arduous task." The first page of the document on the desk was clearly the information on Hugh and Furs. Since being hunted by the Aurora Order last time, they had never returned to their original rented house after escaping with the help of the bracelet's teleportation. Although the Aurora Order case had been transferred to another team, Aaron still sent Darren to search for the whereabouts of those two ladies. Even though the two ladies were extremely careful, with Aaron's reminders and Darren's divination assistance, their traces were finally discovered. Aaron took out a document from under the table and handed it to Darren. Darren took it, and just a glance made his eyes narrow slightly. The first page of the document was clearly marked, Pass River Valley, Southern Continent. Aaron said with a smile, "I have already discussed this matter with the family. The half-god stationed by the family in Pass River Valley will also be exchanged with Joseph Will of Backland recently. After you arrive there, if you encounter any high-level problems that you cannot solve, you can also seek his help. The family's colony in the southern continent will also cooperate with your actions in the southern continent to a certain extent. Remember, your task is only to do the basic work, to prepare for subsequent matters, and not to do anything extra." After emphasizing the task, Aaron also gave a promise. "Within a year, I will go to the southern continent to inspect your results. If I am satisfied, you will have the opportunity to be promoted to Sequence 5 Marionettist. The raging sea, southeast of Harmon Port, a small boat quickly sailed on the sea, heading towards a small island to the east. Ferran wiped the seawater splashing on his face and asked Danitz, who was in front of him, with some helplessness. "How much longer until we arrive? Why do we have to go in such a small boat?" Danitz snorted, his hands moving continuously, rowing hard while replying. "Damn it, it's not far now, you're really stupid. During special times, many people are watching us, so we naturally have to be careful. If we directly take the Seagull, the target would be too big and easily exposed, so we naturally have to take a small boat ourselves midway." Ferran's face was full of black lines. Even though he had been listening all the way, he was still not used to Danitz's foul mouth. Just as he was about to retort, his gaze fixed on the front. A sailboat, dozens of meters long, clean and tidy, reflecting a golden color in the sunlight, appeared next to a small island not far away. On the huge canvas, 5 types of gold coins were depicted: Lowen's gold pounds, Faceax's gold horns, Intis's falcon, Finepot's gold risso, and Lindbergh's Sasson gold. Thanks to several months of bounty hunter experience, Ferran recognized these gold coins from different countries at a glance. Along the central axis of the deck, there was a main cannon that was somewhat unreasonably large. The barrel was long and narrow, engraved with numerous golden patterns that gleamed in the sunlight. Seeing the surprised expression on Ferran's face, Danitz said proudly, "This is our golden dream." As he spoke, Danitz's strength in his hands did not diminish, and he rowed even harder towards the nearby small island, somewhat impatiently wanting to return to the ship and see the captain he hadn't seen in a long time. And to show off to the Iron Tin Bucket and others that he had brought back a new crew member, exceeding the original mission. As the small boat gradually approached the island, Ferran saw sailors busy on the deck and crew members loading and unloading cargo on the island. The most eye-catching was a beautiful lady standing at the bow of the ship. Danitz, who had been vigorously rowing, seemed to be under a body-fixing spell, staring blankly at the bow. Ferran looked at Danitz with disdain. Seeing his pig-like appearance, Ferran knew without a second thought that the lady must be Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina Edwards. After subtly expressing his contempt, Ferran also turned to look at the bow. This was his first time seeing Vice Admiral Iceberg, not on a wanted poster. That was a bounty of a full £26,000. This pirate general had a strong scholarly aura but wore a ruin-style pirate outfit. Her face was oval-shaped, her nose bridge was high, and her lips were thin. Her brown long hair was parted in the middle and tied into a simple yet exquisite knot at the back of her head, then smoothly cascaded down. Her light blue eyes were like clear spring water, seemingly scrutinizing him. Wait, she was scrutinizing him. Farron met those light blue eyes and quickly suppressed the wandering thoughts he had earlier, no longer thinking about the bounty. He lowered his head guiltily. He began to secretly reflect. It seemed that his experience as a bounty hunter had quite a deep impact on him, so much so that whenever he saw a person, he would associate them with a bounty. He had almost forgotten that the person opposite him was about to become his captain for the next few years. A moment later, Danitz led Farron onto the Golden Dream. On the deck, Danitz enthusiastically greeted the crew members, showing off his new crewmate. First mate, Gourmand, Bro Walrus. Second mate, Singer, Orpheus. Third mate, Flower Tie, Yodson, Bosun, Bucket, Daniels. Farron felt a strange sensation looking at these people he had seen on the bounty list. Edwina Edwards' figure suddenly appeared. With a calm expression, she nodded to Danitz, then looked at Farron and asked emotionlessly. "What languages do you know? And what rituals do you understand?" A circle of pirates around them watched with interest. Farron uncomfortably answered the captain's question. Upon hearing that Farron also understood some ancient Hermes and some ritual procedures, Edwina Edwards nodded slightly in satisfaction, then continued. "Since you are already here, it means you are willing to join my fleet. I presume Danitz has already told you that my team does not demand you stay on board all the time. There will be a certain amount of vacation time, but as long as you are on board, you must participate in the weekly fixed study day. Since you already have a certain foundation in ancient Hermes and ritual knowledge, you should be able to catch up with their progress quickly. We will have fixed assessment dates. If your results are unsatisfactory, a portion of your gold pounds will be deducted as punishment." Hearing this, Farron's expression finally changed. He suddenly turned around and glared fiercely at a certain hunter who was still mesmerized by his captain's beauty, wanting to give him a fist the size of a sandbag to the face. Why didn't this, shit-mouthed, Danitz mention such an important matter at all? Backlands Sherwood Borough, Sapphire Street, number 43. The sun had already set, and the afterglow of the sunset bathed the street. Aaron had changed back into his elusive Joseph vest, but unlike before, a white cat was perched on his shoulder. The cat had a light gold necklace around its neck. That was a mystical item called the Hypnosis Necklace, crafted by Michel Vide using the Beander characteristic of a Sequence 6 hypnotist obtained during the exploration of Amon's underground mausoleum, which was extracted step by step and purified from pollution using the Staff of the Sun. The main body was made from a pure Sequence 6 hypnotist Beander characteristic combined with certain Beander materials. To minimize negative effects and extend usage time, it only retained Beander abilities such as soothing and psychological suggestion, and these abilities were somewhat weakened, but the negative effects were also extremely subtle. They would only increase the degree of negative emotional influence, turning displeasure into anger, and melancholy into despair. The longer it was used, the deeper the influence. However, for Evelina, who had been a telepathist for a long time, this was not unavoidable. She could keenly perceive changes in her own emotions and, when necessary, use soothing to calm her emotions. In Sherwood Borough, where small companies and residences were numerous, people came and went on the streets, and many bicycles jingled by, but they all seemed to not notice this strange combination of one person and one cat, and they all tacitly avoided that area. This was psychological invisibility achieved with the Hypnosis Necklace, using control over surrounding mind bodies and psychological blind spots to hide in the dark, placing oneself in an awareness blind spot, thereby achieving a kind of invisibility effect where one stands there, but surrounding pedestrians cannot see or sense them at all. But this was only psychological invisibility. It would still interact with the surroundings, only eliminating the sense of presence and being in a blind spot of attention. Once that interaction became stronger, exposure would be inevitable. Since obtaining this mystical item, Evelina's favorite ability was this one. Although it was a great burden on her spirituality, she still enjoyed it tirelessly, constantly using psychological invisibility to harass the servants at home, even claiming it was practice. As a result, recently, the family's male and female servants always felt that some ghosts or similar things had entered the villa, but thanks to that period of practice, Evelina finally succeeded in helping Aaron with psychological invisibility recently. Aaron glanced at the note in his hand, which was the intelligence Darren had left before leaving, confirming again that the house in front of him was the one Hugh and Furs had rented after fleeing that night. After sensing for a moment, the extra sense on the Beander level from the sheriff did not detect any abnormalities. Aaron adjusted his top hat and stepped forward to knock on the door. Inside the room, both Hugh and Furs were somewhat troubled. Furs was no longer her usual lazy self, sprawled on the sofa. Her hair was disheveled, and she looked at the newspaper on the table and the discarded drafts scattered on the floor with a worried expression. Ever since they escaped using the bracelet last time, fearing retaliation from the lunatics of the Aurora Order, she and Hugh had not returned to their original rented place in East Borough but had rented a house in the well-policed Sherwood Borough. Because they had some expectations before leaving that night, both of them carried valuables with them. Furs brought the notebook left to her by Mrs. Anliza, and Hugh had deposited the commission earned from previous bounty missions in the Backland Bank. It was also thanks to that pre-deposited commission and Furs's recent royalties that the two of them were barely able to temporarily settle in Sherwood Borough, where rent was expensive and living expenses were high. Furs reread the several newspapers she had bought after disguising herself that morning, but still found no reports about the Aurora Order. Without any information, she didn't know what would be considered safe. Just as the two were frowning in thought, a knocking sound, doo-doo-doo, echoed. Zio sat up, pulling out a gleaming three-edged dagger from under the table. Furs, startled by the sudden knock, trembled, and the newspaper in her hand fell onto the table, covering a silver bracelet with 4 remaining dark green, rough stones. Furs hurriedly pushed the newspaper aside, picked up the bracelet, and stared nervously at the door, ready to flee at any moment. Zio gripped the three-edged dagger tightly, slowly walked towards the door, and motioned for Furs to follow behind her. With her left hand on the doorknob, she asked in a low voice, "Who is it?" "Lucid Joseph. I believe Miss Zio should have heard that name." Aaron, maintaining his cold persona, responded from outside the door. Zio was slightly stunned, not expecting the other party to directly state his name. Lucid Joseph was a very famous hunter in the East Borough previously, a true gentleman who enjoyed punishing evil and promoting good. Recalling her previous assessment of him, Zio hesitated, unsure how this gentleman had found this place or what he wanted with her. Uncertain of his purpose, yet unable to keep the door shut indefinitely, which would only make her seem suspicious, Zio deliberated. She then motioned for Furs to move away from her, and she stepped forward to open the door. A somewhat rugged man wearing a black suit and a semi-tall top hat stood indifferently at the door. Zio wondered if she was hallucinating. She seemed to see a white cat on his shoulder, but it vanished in an instant. Although the man opposite had changed his clothes and was no longer wearing his characteristic hunter attire, she recognized him at a glance. It was indeed Lucid Joseph. Aaron stood at the door, his spirituality fluctuating slightly, warning Evelina not to cause trouble. He looked at Zio, who stood by the door gripping a three-edged dagger, and Furs, who stood not far away inside the room. Seeing the Abraham family's bracelet tightly clutched in Furs's hand, Aaron, worried that she might bolt at the slightest disturbance like last time, took the initiative to speak. "The matter of the Aurora Order has been largely resolved. For some reason, the previous events will not be investigated further. You don't need to be so nervous." Furs's eyes immediately lit up, feeling as if a huge weight had finally been lifted from her heart. Xiong, however, stared at the former adventurer with full vigilance, asking without daring to relax in the slightest. "Thank you very much for the information, Mr. Lucid. What do you and the power behind you want with us?" Xiong was no longer the naive little girl who had just arrived in Backland. She and the gentleman in front of her were only nodding acquaintances. Why would he specially come to tell her such a secret? Furthermore, it was impossible for a mere hunter to know such information. There must be an organization behind him. Looking at the two nervous faces before him, Aaron uttered a single word in a low voice, "Mason dear." Ignoring the drastic change in Xiong's expression, he walked in unconcernedly, sat on the sofa, and motioned for Furs, who was standing somewhat bewildered, to close the door. Furs looked worriedly at Xiong, finally remembering that this seemed to be Xiong's father's name, and then carefully closed the door. "I work for a certain important figure, and I am also a member of MI9. I know your purpose in coming to Backland, and I also know the answer you seek." Aaron sat on the sofa, looking at Xiong, whose face showed a glimmer of hope, and added, "But you are completely unqualified to know about that matter right now. Everything you want to do requires greater strength. And I can now offer you such an opportunity. You can become my subordinate, complete the tasks I provide, and exchange your subsequent sequence advancements based on your contributions." Seeing Xiong nod without hesitation, Aaron smiled faintly and handed over a document, saying with a subtle smile, "This is your first task. Investigate his crimes and obtain concrete evidence." Xiong looked at the name on the document and asked with a slight surprise, "Cap'n? The wealthy man who also lives in Sherwood Borough?" Aaron nodded slightly, then said with a sarcastic tone, "In Backland, innocent young girls often disappear on secluded, deserted streets, and after a long time, they might be accidentally discovered in various legal or illegal brothels. Numerous rumors point to Cap'n, believing him to be a criminal boss with blood-stained hands and a dirty reputation, but due to insufficient evidence, he remains free to this day and has befriended many important figures." Furs, listening nearby, clenched her fists, wishing she could just open the door and go to Cap'n's house to bring him to justice, but then she quietly chickened out, feeling that her current combat power was insufficient to complete such a task. At the same time, she secretly planned to create another scoundrel named Carl in her work, Wuthering Heights, and have a righteous and brave detective lady bring this scoundrel to justice and send him to the gallows. Neither Xiong nor Aaron noticed Furs's peculiarity. Instead, Evelina, who was squatting on the sofa in psychological invisibility, quickly noticed Furs's silly grin. After observing her with her telepathous ability, she concluded, a timid but very imaginative human, then rolled over and paid no further attention. Xiong flipped through the thick stack of materials in her hand, looking at the numerous accusations against Cap'n, feeling that this scoundrel deserved to die 10,000 times over. Aaron did not pay attention to Xiong's reaction. Cap'n was merely a tool. Even if Cap'n died, as long as George III still needed people like Cap'n to plunder the population, there would continue to be people like Grappin, Ipin, and so on. The reason for troubling Cap'n now was simply for his subsequent acting and to gain some initiative, thereby exchanging for more benefits. To prevent Xiong from accidentally touching upon things she shouldn't know yet and bringing trouble upon herself, Aaron still reminded her. "You just need to find a way to track and collect evidence of Cap'n's crimes, and verify his charges. Even if some things you uncover raise questions, you must suppress your curiosity and not do anything unnecessary, if you still want to live to get the answer you seek. Also, this house is not far from Cap'n's villa. I have already paid the rent for the next 2 months, so you can stay here and operate for the time being." Xiong was stunned, instantly understanding Aaron's meaning. The task's duration was only 2 months. If it couldn't be completed within 2 months, it would be considered a failure. No longer looking at Xiong, who was deep in thought, Aaron turned his head to look at Furs, who was still standing in the corner, with a silly grin, seemingly lost in thought. Furs only felt a sharp gaze fall on her, making her shiver all over, and she immediately woke up from her fantasy of punishing evildoers. Looking at those indifferent eyes, Furs chuckled dryly, stammering slightly, hello, it's an honor to meet you, Mr. Luswide. At the same time, she muttered to herself, is this the oppressive feeling of a famous hunter? Why don't I feel this aura from Xiong? Is it because she's too weak? No, I need to add a powerful adventurer who is understanding and always willing to help the detective lady. Let's call him Alan Caesar. Seeing this author lady once again lost in her own thoughts, but not showing any panic or dejection, Aaron recalled the weather conditions of the past few days. It seemed there hadn't been a red full moon yet. Aaron immediately understood. So this guy hadn't heard Mr. Door's full moon ravings yet, no wonder she was so lively. Looking at the silver bracelet on Furz's hand, and the 4 remaining rough dark green stones on it, Aaron calculated inwardly, his eyes flickering. Realizing she had zoned out, Furz quickly snapped back, secretly glancing at the mysterious and powerful hunter opposite her. Although he was staring at her, his gaze was more focused on the bracelet Mrs. Anneliese had given her. Furz's heart inexplicably fluttered, remembering the cost of using this bracelet from Mrs. Anneliese's leftover notes. Her heart immediately sank. Originally worried about the Aurora Order's search and retaliation, plus the lack of any other abnormal reactions these days, she hadn't paid much attention to this aspect. At this moment, she became somewhat nervous, her fingers twirling the ends of her chestnut-colored long hair, her face full of struggle, wanting to ask but not daring to. Aaron glanced at Furz. Even without the ability of a telepathist, he could see through this guy's thoughts at a glance and calmly said, "This bracelet comes from an ancient family, and this family has always been enduring let's call it a curse." Aaron paused in the middle, revealing a strange expression that neither Furz nor Xiong understood. "You must already be clear about its ability. As long as you pull off a stone and recite, Door, in ancient Hermes, you can use the spirit world to travel to your desired location." Furz exchanged a strange look with Xiong. She always felt that Mr. Luswide understood this mystical item better than she, its user, did. Aaron withdrew his gaze from the bracelet, raised it slightly, and looked into Furz's light blue eyes, making Furz even more nervous. Then he spoke without any emotion. For most people, this bracelet is a very valuable and practical mystical item. But after a Beyander of the apprentice pathway uses it, they will hear full moon ravings every full moon. You will directly hear mad ravings, which cannot be blocked by normal means. You can only endure them silently. If you can't endure them, you will lose control and die. Full moon ravings. Furz's body began to tremble again. Mrs. Anneliese's notes didn't detail full moon ravings. She stammered for a moment and asked, will I die? Aaron looked at the instantly timid, lazy fish lady and said calmly, suppressing his smile, "No, at least not for now." Furz and Xiong had just breathed a sigh of relief when their hearts tightened again. What did, "not for now," mean? Aaron raised his hand and pointed at the bracelet Furz was tightly gripping, explaining. Every time you use a stone on the bracelet, the influence of the full moon ravings on you will deepen. But even if you never use the bracelet again from now on, the influence of the ravings you receive each full moon will be deeper than the last time. After hearing Aaron's explanation, Furz's face instantly turned incredibly pale, and Xiong's expression was also somewhat grim. To be honest, neither of them had anticipated such a significant side effect of the bracelet before using it. Both had already entered the Beyander world, so they naturally understood the meaning of losing control. Looking at the dazed, even somewhat despairing, lazy fish lady, Aaron felt he shouldn't discourage her too much. After all, the situation wasn't that serious yet. However, if Aaron had known that this author lady had just written him into her novel, he would definitely have scared her for a little longer. There's no need for that expression. You've only used one stone, and it hasn't reached that point yet. You'll initially be less affected by the full moon ravings. At least for the first 2 years, there will be no life-threatening danger. Instead, you can use this to strengthen your tolerance to the ravings, which is something many Beyonders dream of. Aaron teased, and Furz barely twitched the corner of her mouth, wailing in her heart, "I don't want this kind of opportunity," but she only dared to shout it internally. You can also become an outer member of our organization for now, completing missions with this lady, accumulating contributions, and obtaining a method to be free from the influence of the full moon ravings. Aaron said, pointing to Zio. Furs hastily spoke, afraid that answering too slowly would displease this gentleman. Willing, thank you very much for your help and information. Aaron took out a stack of large banknotes from his jacket pocket, placed them on the table opposite, and said coldly, "Don't thank me yet. This basic information is a benefit for you becoming outer members. Diligently completing missions and being loyal to the organization is the correct way for you to express your gratitude. Next is our transaction. This is a total of 600 pounds in cash. I want to buy 1 stone from your bracelet. This is a very fair price. Although for non-apprentice pathway beyonders, this is almost a life-saving divine artifact, it can only be used once. As a consumable, 600 pounds is already considered a very high price." Furs felt her heart pounding wildly. The low mood she had felt earlier upon learning about being entangled with the full moon ravings vanished. 600 pounds. Living in Sherwood Borough these past few days, her and Zio's savings were almost spent. She was truly impoverished now, and ever since she learned the cost of an apprentice pathway beyonder using that bracelet, Furs had secretly vowed never to use it again. Since that was the case, it was better to sell it. Having made up her mind, she exchanged a look with Zio, no longer hesitating. Furs took off a cyan stone and placed it on the table. Seeing that the matter was concluded, Aaron got up, picked up the stone, and was about to leave. Zio also quickly got up and asked, a little nervously, "Mr. Luswide, how should I contact you for submitting subsequent intelligence and mission information?" Furs lowered her head and stammered, adding, "And the rewards and contributions for completing missions." Aaron walked out without looking back, but his voice clearly carried, "The usual place, Backland Bridge area, Iron Gate Streets, Brave Ones, Bar, find Caspers." Aaron's figure slowly walked out of the room, disappearing into the crowd. Furs quickly stepped forward and closed the door, and after hearing the sound of the door closing, both of them sat on the sofa, feeling somewhat exhausted. In less than 2/4 of an hour, Furs had learned too much. She felt her brain wasn't enough to process it all. The bracelet, the ancient family, the full moon's ravings. Furs felt that she really needed some time to calm down and think. Looking at the discarded drafts scattered on the floor and the 600 pounds cash on the table, Furs swore she wasn't deliberately procrastinating, but rather it was forced by circumstances. Furs muttered to herself, "He's a strange and mysterious hunter, but he's a true gentleman." Beside her, Zio glanced at the bracelet on her friend's wrist, which now only had 3 stones left, and added, "After all, he could have just robbed us, and we probably couldn't have resisted except by teleporting away." After they finished speaking, they fell silent, both lamenting their own weakness. Furs sat up from the sofa and began writing a letter to her newspaper editor, explaining that she was moving and would need to stop writing for a few days. Since she wouldn't die within 2 years, and as long as she endured the pain of the full moon, there was a chance if she didn't die. Furs decided to quickly accumulate contributions to exchange for a method to get rid of the ravings as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Zio, who had truly found clues to her father's case, was full of energy. She picked up the stack of documents regarding Capham's crimes and began to read them carefully, considering the direction of her investigation. By the window, a white cat with a light gold necklace hanging from its chest was quietly observing their words and actions, but neither of them seemed to notice it. Immediately, the white cat's figure disappeared, only to reappear a moment later on Aaron's shoulder in a small alley in Sherwood Borough. Zio felt a gust of wind, looked towards the window, and saw that the sunset had completely faded, and the red moon had already risen. Backland, Empress Borough, Earl Hall's luxurious villa. Audrey looked at Evelina, who was playing with Susie, and a gentle smile appeared on her delicate face. Recently, Susie had learned how to open doors with handles. Audrey didn't need to open the door at all. Susie lifted her front paw, gave a gentle push, and with a click, the door opened. Two figures, one gold and one white, instantly vanished. Seeing these two mischievous darlings only caring about running out to play and not even closing the door, Audrey lifted her skirt and walked gracefully to gently close the door to avoid being disturbed by Annie and the others later. She then returned to her desk. Looking at the letter on the table, Audrey's mood became pleasant and expectant. She eagerly tore open the letter, and what met her eyes was the familiar handwriting. Backland's most dazzling jewel, the beautiful Miss Audrey. A hint of shyness flashed in her emerald eyes, like the purest gems, and a bashful smile involuntarily appeared on her delicate face as she continued reading. The first half of the letter recounted historical stories rich in mystical elements, which interested Audrey the most. Audrey remembered that the previous letter's story had just introduced the legendary Antigonus family of the Fourth Epoch, but only briefly mentioned that it was one of the great nobles of the Tudor Empire in the Fourth Epoch. This successfully piqued Audrey's interest. In the days she hadn't received a letter, she had also actively searched for information about the Antigonus family. However, Audrey also kept Aaron's reminder in the letter firmly in mind, not making a big fuss. She only collected information simply as a mysticism enthusiast, and thus the information she obtained was extremely limited. Audrey unfolded the letter and read on, seeing that the Antigonus family had built the city of the dead, turning their deceased believers into mummified puppets, hanging upside down within the city. Thinking about that scene, Audrey immediately felt a little scared, until she saw the end of the story, where the Antigonus family was annihilated by the Evernight goddess church at the end of the Fourth Epoch. Audrey gently exhaled, drew a crimson moon on her chest, and thought happily to herself. Not allowing corpses to rest is truly an evil act. The souls and bodies of the deceased should find peaceful slumber. Praise the Evernight goddess. To avoid unnecessary trouble, the historical stories Aaron described only touched upon the most superficial parts, belonging to a certain level of secrecy, but even if others knew, they would only marvel at Lord Aaron's extensive knowledge. At the end of the story, the rest of the letter became somewhat improper. Audrey glanced at it, and her face immediately flushed. Then, she thought of something, looked around somewhat guiltily, and hastily got up to lock the door. My dearest Miss Audrey, I hope this letter conveys my deep longing for you. Whenever I close my eyes, your face appears in my mind, like Backland's most dazzling jewel, brilliantly radiant. Audrey, blushing, read to the end of the letter, where the signature read, Your best friend, Aaron Weil. Looking at the open letter in front of her, Audrey was somewhat lost in thought, wondering what she was thinking. Dash 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 dash. In the living room of Earl Hall's residence, Earl Hall, with two handsome small mustaches, azure eyes, relaxed muscles, a bulging belly, and nasolabial folds on his face, sat on the sofa reading a newspaper. His eldest son, Hibbert Hall, sat beside him. Hibbert smiled and said to Earl Hall, Father, this year we've outmaneuvered the Conservative Party and passed the repeal of the Corn Laws. This is a great opportunity for our new party to grow and strengthen. Next Wednesday is your 50th birthday dinner. Who do you think we should invite? Earl Hall put down the newspaper and was about to answer when he was interrupted by other sounds. Susie led Evelina through the living room, heading straight for the garden in the backyard. Audrey's personal maid, Annie, helplessly chased after them but was still left behind. Ever since Audrey disciplined her last time, Susie no longer ran wild in the villa. As long as Evelina came, she would take her to the backyard garden to chase and play, and indeed, she rarely damaged things in the house anymore, which also had Audrey's support. The only drawback was that every time they returned from the backyard garden, the chore maids had to give Susie and Evelina a good bath. Therefore, Audrey would always allocate a portion of her pocket money as a reward to the chore maids. Hibbert watched Evelina run off after Susie, his gaze flickering. He looked at his father, Earl Hall, and continued to ask. Father, are you planning to invite Lord Aaron to your party? This would be an excellent opportunity for our new party. Earl Hall smiled and said, Of course, you young people should interact more. But don't worry about the invitations, I've already spoken with Audrey. At this point, Earl Hall sighed and self-deprecatingly said in a slightly teasing tone, "In that lord's heart, your father's face isn't as important as Audrey's." He then put away his smile and said to Hibbert with a meaningful look, "What you want, you should strive for yourself. Don't think about relying on Audrey. I hope their relationship develops naturally, without any other elements mixed in, do you understand?" Audrey's thoughts soared as she carefully folded the letter on the table, took out paper and pen again, rested her chin in her hands, and pondered her father's words from that evening. With a pen in her right hand and her left hand on her forehead, Audrey pondered, troubled, how to write the letter, how to invite Aaron to her father's birthday banquet while subtly expressing her strong interest in the story to come. After a moment's thought, Audrey's eyes brightened, and she picked up a piece of letter paper and began to write. I invite you to my father's birthday party on Wednesday evening. Also, I really enjoy your story, and if you have enough time, I hope you can tell it to me in person. Your best friend, Audrey Hall. Audrey finished the last paragraph of the letter, her eyes subtly turning, and with her pen, she drew a smiley face at the end of the letter. Once the ink was dry, she folded the letter and put it into an envelope. Humming a cheerful tune, Audrey lifted her skirt, opened the door, and prepared to look for Susie and Evelyn, who had run off somewhere. Empress Borough, Backland, on the second floor of East Taker family's luxurious villa. The red moonlight spilled onto the window ledge. With a creak, the window was pushed open, and Evelyn, carrying a small bag, darted in. Aaron skillfully took out the letter, unfolded it with a smile, and began to read. When he saw the smiley face at the end of the letter, Aaron smiled, shook his head, folded the letter, and carefully put it away. Wednesday, huh? Time is a bit tight, Aaron mused to himself, then glanced at the wall clock. It's only 11 o'clock, not too late. He then walked to the changing room, changed his clothes, put on a death mask, and picked up the cyan stone he had bought from Furs. His figure blurred and disappeared. When Aaron opened his eyes, he was already at East Taker Manor in the suburbs. The guards were slightly surprised to see Aaron. After verifying his identity, Aaron walked in and headed straight to Michelle Ved's workshop. The workshop was filled with incessant clanging sounds. Michelle Ved was forging a whip-shaped weapon. Seeing Aaron walk in, he looked surprised, stopped his work, and went to greet him. He glanced at the wall clock, and his mood instantly became complicated. It inexplicably reminded him of that dark and windy night when he had met Earl Aaron at home around the same time for a friendly exchange. "Earl Aaron, what do you need forged this time?" It was no wonder Michelle Ved asked this way. After all, apart from the first, friendly, recruitment, every subsequent meeting with Earl had been for the purpose of forging mystical items, which he had grown accustomed to. Seeing the craftsman being so understanding, Aaron nodded in satisfaction, took out the dark cyan, rough stone, and said to Michelle Ved, "This is a rather unusual mystical item. By reciting door in ancient Hermes, one can use the spirit world to travel to a desired location. It's very practical, but unfortunately, it can only be used once. And I've come this time because I want you to forge it into a mystical item that can be used by ordinary people who don't possess much spirituality. After all, its essence is to travel through the spirit world, but ordinary people cannot distinguish directions in the spirit world." Michelle Ved pondered for a moment, then slowly said, "Well, you could use some spiritual materials to assemble the exterior as a source of spirituality to activate the teleportation, and engrave guiding patterns on it." He then added, "These are only theoretically feasible. I need to check some material. Moreover, if it's for ordinary people to use, some sun domain charms would also need to be inscribed to prevent disturbances from other spiritual bodies during spirit world teleportation." Aaron gave him an approving look and continued, "Very good, then proceed with your idea. Use the best materials, and make it into a necklace. Remember to make the necklace exquisite and beautiful. It's a gift for a friend, Aaron emphasized, staring at Michel Ved. Michel Ved froze for a moment, feeling a vague sense of unease, and responded. All right, Earl Aaron, when do you need this item? So I can arrange my time. Aaron placed his hand on Michel Ved's shoulder, applying a slight pressure, and said with a smile. 2.5 days. I can give you a maximum of 2.5 days. I need to see the finished product before Wednesday afternoon. You should be able to complete it, right? Michel Ved felt the pressure on his shoulder, his face twitched, and he looked back somewhat helplessly at the nearly formed whip-shaped weapon behind him and the few unfinished molds not far away. Aaron's smile did not diminish, and he followed his gaze, adding, any material losses incurred will be borne by me. You don't need to worry about that. Michel Ved sighed helplessly and nodded in agreement. Ahawa County, Loan Kingdom, on the banks of the Hoi River in Tingen City. The gentle morning breeze brought a comfortable feeling. Inside the conference room of the Hoi University History Department, two people sat facing each other. One wore a vice professor's robe, with a serious face and a strong scholarly aura. The other was a middle-aged man of medium build with bronze-colored skin. He was clean-shaven, wore a top hat, had black hair and brown eyes, soft features, and his eyes revealed an indescribable sense of vicissitude. Below his right ear was a small black mole that could only be seen upon closer inspection. Cohen, a senior associate professor in the history department at Hoi University, put down the resume in his hand, thought for a moment, and then asked the man opposite him several specialized questions about 4th epoch and 5th epoch history. The middle-aged man opposite responded quickly without hesitation or pause. After hearing the answers, Associate Professor Cohen nodded in satisfaction, stood up, and extended his right hand, saying, Mr. Ask Eggers, your professional capabilities are sufficient to qualify for the position of lecturer in the history department at Hoi University. Welcome to join us. Ask smiled, stood up as well, and extended his hand. Associate Professor Cohen greatly appreciated Mr. Ask's views on certain historical issues, even though these views might differ somewhat from his own. Just as the two were about to delve deeper into some historical topics, the conference room door was suddenly knocked. Associate Professor Cohen frowned and called out loudly, "Come in." The conference room door was pushed open, and 2 men and 1 woman entered with smiles. Seeing the 3, Associate Professor Cohen's expression softened, and he introduced them to Mr. Ask beside him. These 3 are my students, Klein Moretti, Welch McGovern, and Naya. He then pointed to Mr. Ask and introduced him to his students. This is Mr. Ask Eggers, the new lecturer in the history department at Hoi University. You can consult him if you have any questions in the future. Klein Moretti, with black hair, brown eyes, ordinary features, a deeper outline, and a clear scholarly air, bowed slightly and extended his right hand, shaking hands with the new history department lecturer, Mr. Ask. Backlands East Borough, Iron Gate Street. Pale yellow mist permeated the surroundings, blurring the figures of passers-by, and the chill of early morning seeped into their clothes. Shu wore heavily padded boots and a thick beard, making herself look like a short man, with Furs, who wore a light brown peaked cap, beside her. Originally, Shu was unwilling for her friend to risk herself by participating in the investigation, but ever since she learned that the price of that bracelet would endanger her friend's life, she completely changed her attitude. Early in the morning, she pulled Furs, who was sprawled in bed, up, and using the authority of an arbiter, forcefully took Furs out, preparing to help her friend accumulate enough contributions as soon as possible to exchange for a method to escape the influence of the full moon's whispers. Furs rubbed her eyes, still blurry with sleep, and was about to yawn when she was choked by the pale yellow mist pervading the air, coughing several times before recovering, though this also made her much more awake. Furs felt like she was about to crack. She had stayed up until dawn replying to her editor and organizing her manuscripts from this period. After finally falling asleep, she kept dreaming of her body mutating into a disgusting monster under a red full moon, waking up several times in fright, and then, just as she finally stopped dreaming, she was forcefully booted up by Shu. Shu listened to her friend's constant grumbling complaints along the way and responded helplessly in a low voice. All right, I admit I was too impatient, but this is entirely due to you scaring yourself, isn't it? Well then, next time we'll leave at 9 a.m., that should give you a bit more time, right? Furs chuckled, shamelessly leaning close to Shu and rubbing her head. How about 12 p.m.? We can go after lunch, that way we'll have more strength. Shu slapped away the hand on her head, her arbiter's authority evident as she stared at her friend, and Furz's voice grew lower and lower until it was gradually inaudible. Shu retracted her gaze, lowered her head, and hurried along, just like the early morning commuters around her, while Furz pouted and quickly followed. The two arrived at the Bravehearts Bar, deep in Iron Gate Street. During the day, the Bravehearts Bar was sparsely populated, as the alcoholics clearly only came here for entertainment after work in the evening. Behind the counter, Kaspar's Canrinning's face no longer held the anxiety of a few weeks ago. He was humming a tune and wiping glasses. Seeing a short man enter with a tall lady, he immediately whistled and said with a smile, "What can I get for you two?" Shu lowered her voice and said, "Kaspar's Canrinning, Mr. Luciford Joseph sent us." Hearing the familiar voice, Kaspar's Canrinning was slightly startled and stared for a while before recognizing that the short man in front of him was Shu. After confirming their identities, Kaspars smiled again and personally led the two to a private room in the back, closed the door, and pulled out two identification documents from a drawer, bearing the Backland Police Department's insignia. Kaspars smiled and handed the two documents to Furz and Shu, and meeting the two ladies' slightly puzzled gazes, he said with a smile. "These are the documents that Luciford left with me. They can help you with some investigations, and you can even borrow some more official power." Shu took the document and glanced at the smiling Kaspars, still unable to resist asking, "What are you now?" Kaspars's smile widened. With this semi-official support, he no longer had to worry about previous matters, and he cleared his throat and said, "I am honored to be valued. I also serve that important figure. Mr. Luciford will leave your tasks with me. Just like how you usually receive tasks, but afterward, we will all come to the private room for individual transactions." Shu nodded, put away the document, and took the more detailed intelligence that Kaspars handed her, scanning it and pausing on a street name, East Borough Black Palm Street. Dash 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 dash. Furz took out her fake reporter's ID and followed Shu, who was disguised as a man, walking along Black Palm Street in the East Borough. The harsh environment made both of them frown involuntarily. The two left the streets covered in trash and waste and walked along a tributary of the Tussock River in the East Borough. As they walked, Shu saw a middle-aged man, 40 or 50 years old, with graying temples and wearing a thick jacket, kneeling by the river in front of them. He was covering his face and weeping bitterly, with shoemaking tools scattered at his feet. Is he going to jump into the river to commit suicide? Not only in LotM, but across the entire northern continent, suicide is not only prohibited by the major churches but also subject to legal punishment. As for the reason, Shu was originally unclear, until she gradually understood the relevant matters after encountering some strange things during bounty missions. Firstly, many suicides choose to drown themselves, and if not discovered in time, there is a certain probability of turning into a water ghost. Secondly, the emotions of suicides are often very abnormal, and in this state, ending one's life is akin to sacrifice, which may resonate with certain strange and terrifying existences. Therefore, the 7 Orthodox churches all prohibit their followers from committing suicide based on their own doctrines, and the royal family has also promoted corresponding legislation. Shu frowned. Although she didn't fully understand the specific situation yet, she still used her leg strength to appear behind the middle-aged man and drag him away from the riverside. Pulled down by the sudden force, the middle-aged man raised his tear-stained, wrinkled face, his eyes filled with gloom. Furz sighed, accustomed to Shu's meddling nature, and also walked up, took out her fake reporter's ID, and using the original reason of investigating missing persons, said to the man, "Sir, I am a reporter, and I am here to investigate the living conditions of the people in the East Borough. You can tell me anything you've experienced, and I might be able to help you." The man's originally gloomy eyes instantly lit up with a spark of hope. His voice was hoarse but full of pleading as he looked at Furs, kneeling on the ground and kowtowing repeatedly. "Miss Reporter, please save my family. I'll do anything you ask." Furs, who had only been pretending to take out her notebook, paused slightly and exchanged glances with Shu, then somewhat helplessly helped the man up from the ground and led him to a nearby tree stump. The middle-aged man hastily wiped the tears from his face, took off his jacket, and placed the cleaner side on the tree stump, saying respectfully, even humbly, "Miss Reporter, please sit." Furs sighed, did not sit down, and asked directly, "You can tell me your story now." A look of pain and daze flashed across the middle-aged man's face, finally turning numb, and he spoke in a hoarse voice. "My name is Kohler. I used to live in a dilapidated house on the side of Black Palm Street. Everyone called me Old Kohler. I was originally a decent worker, had a wife, and 2 lovely children, a boy and a girl. But 2 weeks ago, they suddenly contracted an infectious disease. I was very lucky not to get sick, but I also stayed in the hospital for a few days, and therefore lost my job, lost everything." Then his tone became agitated, full of pleading as he continued. "I have nothing left now, only my 2 children who are still lying in the dilapidated house. I can no longer afford the hospital fees." Furs didn't foolishly ask where his wife was, but instead looked at Shu for help. She had originally thought that Old Kohler's family members were missing, and perhaps she could find clues about human trafficking, but the actual situation was beyond her expectations, leaving her somewhat at a loss, especially since they didn't have much time for the investigation. Shu sighed, looking at the tear-streaked Old Kohler in front of her, and after a moment of thought, asked, "How did this infectious disease appear? Have many people been infected?" Old Kohler lowered his head, recalling painfully, "My wife worked at Kappan's factory, as a grocery worker. More than 2 weeks ago, she suddenly fell ill and was dismissed by the factory. Many workers at Kappan's factory contracted this strange illness. Quite a few went to the police station to report it, but they were all beaten back by those East Borough police." Kappan. Furs's eyes immediately lit up. She exchanged a look with Shu, both a little surprised. "My wife fell ill, followed by my 2 children. I was also sent to the hospital. Since then, I've often been unable to find work," Old Kohler said numbly, with a hint of reminiscence and sadness. "All my money went to the hospital, hoping they could save my family. To save money while they were hospitalized, I waited for an opportunity to enter the workhouse. But every workhouse has a limit on numbers. If I was lucky and queued in time, I could live well for a few days, recover some strength, and then find a temporary job. Until the day before yesterday, the hospital sent my 2 children back." Old Kohler paused, adding, "And my wife's ashes. I returned to that dilapidated house to take care of my children. My original job was shoemaking, but they fired me today, just saying my hands were trembling." After all, Furs was not a professional reporter, and for a moment, she didn't know what to ask. She looked around, and through the pale, yellowish mist, she only saw faces with clear signs of hunger. Some were still relatively clear-headed, these were residents of the East Borough. Others were numb and exhausted, not looking like humans, these were vagrants. After a few minutes of silence, Shu walked over, forcefully handed him a handful of copper pennies, and pulled him up. "This is for the interview. Now, take us to see your children." Old Kohler was stunned for a moment, then quickly got up and led the 2 kind people to his small hut. They walked along the lower street, constantly seeing residents with torn clothes, numb expressions, and malnutrition. They even encountered 2 cases of natural death, both belonging to the type of long-term starvation, poor health, and sudden illness. As a former doctor and current author, Furs rarely came to the East Borough, and even if she did, she wouldn't go deep. Despite having some expectations, she still found the scene before her somewhat difficult to accept. As a bounty hunter who had long been active in the East Borough, Shu already understood the true conditions of the lowest strata of the East Borough and was somewhat numb to it. She silently exhaled and whispered to Furs. Every month, countless people suffer and pass away here. However, bankrupt farmers and former slaves pouring in from the South Continent will quickly fill their places. Just like endless stalks, one crop after another. Both fell silent, following Old Kohler in front through the choking mist. East Borough, Black Palm Street. Old Kohler led the two to a simple, dilapidated hut. There was almost no furniture inside. Two children lay on a bed made of straw, their bodies emaciated and bloodless. As a former doctor, Furs immediately frowned. She took out a mask from her pocket, which she had specifically brought to protect herself from the smog. After an examination, she actually discovered several diseases. This was somewhat unusual. Furs secretly noted it down, planning to use it as a clue. She then quickly wrote a prescription and a note, handing them together to Old Kohler. This prescription can at most stabilize your children's condition. Tomorrow, you can take them to this place, only there can they be saved. Old Kohler's face showed excitement and gratitude. He eagerly took the note and the prescription. The note read, Backland, Sherwood Borough, 43 Siffield Street. Dash 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 dash. Wednesday afternoon, Backland Suburbs, East Taker Manor. Lord Aaron sat on the sofa outside Michelle Wade's workshop, looking at the necklace in his hand with satisfaction. The necklace was entirely composed of emerald green spiritual crystals, with golden patterns running across its surface, making it exquisite and luxurious. The pendant of the necklace was a smooth, dark green hexagonal stone that had been carved and polished, with a profound and complex rune engraved on its surface. After placing it in an exquisite gift box, Lord Aaron put it away with satisfaction, then looked at Michelle Wade, who had dark circles under his eyes, and listened to his introduction. Lord Aaron, this necklace basically meets the requirements you raised last time. Even ordinary people who have not become beyonders can use it, but relying solely on the necklace's spirituality, it can only transmit short distances and cannot support long-distance transmission. It is engraved with symbolic signs and runes from the Sun domain. When worn normally, it can remove a certain degree of negative effects. When performing spirit world transmission, it can dispel the influence of spiritual bodies, but it is still recommended that ordinary people close their eyes when using transmission to avoid seeing things they shouldn't. Lord Aaron nodded, looking at the emerald-colored necklace lying quietly in the gift box, and said with a smile, stroking his chin, "Let's call you, Chain of Emerald." He then looked at Michelle Wade, who was standing opposite him, pointed to the face-down paper on the table, and motioned for him to pick it up. Michelle Wade, somewhat puzzled, stepped forward and picked up the paper. It read, Sequence 8 feet Barbarian. Main ingredients: 1 berserk grass, 1 solid horn crystal of an earth rhinoceros. Auxiliary ingredients: 1 deep-veined walnut, 1 lemon balm, 10 milliliters of pure dew soaked from poplar bark, 100 milliliters of strong alcohol. Barbarian formula. Michelle Wade's tired face, with its dark circles, flashed with a hint of joy. After carefully noting down the formula, he destroyed the paper with the formula on it in front of Lord Aaron. When Michelle Wade looked up again, Lord Aaron and the gift box containing the Chain of Emerald had already disappeared. After sighing inwardly, he quickly found his daughter, Savina Wade. He told her the barbarian potion formula and cautioned her not to spread it, then returned to the workshop to continue his creation from a few days ago. Dash 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 dash. Wednesday, 7 p.m., Empress Borough, Earl Hall's luxurious villa. Various luxurious carriages arrived one after another, stopping at the entrance, forming a line. Many nobles, bankers, and merchants, accompanied by their wives or daughters, stepped down from the carriages. As Earl Hall's eldest son, Hibbert Hall personally stood at the entrance to greet guests. This was also his own request, and Earl Hall agreed, thinking it would give his eldest son more experience. Hibbert Hall greeted the guests with a warm and polite smile, noticing that many unexpected people were also attending the banquet, which made him sigh. However, as time passed, the guest he most wanted to see had not yet arrived. A hint of anxiety appeared between his brows. After he inquired about the time with the butler for the third time, an exquisite and luxurious carriage finally slowly arrived, adorned with the emblem symbolizing the East-Taker family. Hibbert Hall's eyes immediately lit up, and he walked directly forward, somewhat impolitely. Many of the guests still around, especially the nobles and bankers, exchanged glances, their eyes flickering. The carriage slowly stopped. The attendant opened the side door. Before anyone could react, a white figure suddenly shot out and disappeared without a trace. Hibbert Hall was stunned for a moment. He saw a man who looked to be in his early 40s step down from the carriage. His blue eyes were deep, his face was thin, and his features were not particularly handsome, yet he somehow gave people a pleasant feeling. Bishop Electra. Hibbert Hall looked at the bishop of the Church of the Ninth Street, Samuel Church in North Backland, with some surprise. As a devout believer of the Evernight goddess, he was naturally familiar with this bishop. The guests who had been paying attention around them naturally included many believers of the Evernight goddess, and they all recognized this bishop. Aaron followed Bishop Electra down. To avoid overly provoking the Conservative Party, Aaron specifically went to St. Samuel Church in advance and invited Bishop Electra to attend the gathering with him. He stated that he was only attending Earl Hall's party, as an important believer of the Evernight goddess, in his capacity as a believer of the Evernight goddess, alongside the bishop. Hibbert Hall cleared his throat. With the bishop present, he felt it was inappropriate to go up and chat right now, so he led Aaron and the bishop to the banquet hall. In the banquet hall, Earl Hall stood at the center, chatting and laughing with the various guests. After Aaron entered, he went straight over and began conversing with Earl Hall. The weather in Backland has been getting worse and worse recently. There's smog everywhere. Before, I even had the People's Daily do a special survey, which said that similar weather increased from about 60 days 30 years ago to around 75 days now. Empress Borough is still alright, but the weather in other places is terrible to the extreme. Earl Hall reined in his smile, his expression solemn as he nodded in agreement with Aaron's words. Many nobles around them, especially their wives, showed expressions of deep agreement. Aaron chuckled. For this, many insightful people have established organizations like the Soot Reduction Association and the Flue Gas Reduction Association, but these have had very little effect for various reasons and haven't played the role they originally should have. The guests, who had originally only offered perfunctory agreement but lacked interest, were like sharks smelling blood, their gazes fixed intently on Aaron. Some businessmen who had been all smiles began to feel uneasy. Looking at the slightly fervent gazes around him, Aaron cleared his throat and continued. To ensure Backland is no longer shrouded in smog, and to ensure residents no longer have to endure this harsh environment, I propose establishing the Kingdom Atmospheric Pollution Investigation Committee, and granting it more power to thoroughly address atmospheric pollution. As he spoke, he looked at the thoughtful Earl Hall, then turned to Hibbert Hall beside him, and said with a smile, I've long heard that you hoped for a more challenging job to temper yourself. If this Kingdom Atmospheric Pollution Investigation Committee can be established, I believe you will also make significant progress within it. Don't you agree, esteemed Earl Hall? Looking at the confident and composed Aaron, a hint of appreciation flashed in Earl Hall's eyes. He then glanced at his eldest son, who could barely conceal his joy, and slowly spoke with a smile. A very good proposal. After you formally submit the bill to the Parliament, I will push for its discussion as soon as possible, but you must also understand that there will be great resistance and many vested interests involved, so we cannot act too hastily. After speaking, he looked Aaron up and down again, then smiled and patted his shoulder, saying, Go on, Audrey has been waiting for you for a long time. Aaron cleared his throat and bid farewell to Earl Hall. Aaron politely declined several nobles holding champagne who wanted to approach and chat, and walked towards Bishop Electra. After all, he was the one who brought him, so he should at least say hello. Upon reaching him, Bishop Electra was conversing with a typical Loan gentleman in his 40s. He had black hair, brown eyes, profound features, a high hairline, and a slightly gaunt face. Just as Aaron was curiously observing and guessing the gentleman's identity, Bishop Electra proactively introduced him. "This is Counselor Mahet, a good friend of mine, also a believer of the goddess, and a member of the new party." Aaron immediately felt a sense of familiarity but couldn't recall the source of it for a moment, so he politely exchanged greetings first. The counselor waved his hand, and two ladies, clearly a mother and daughter, walked over from a distance. After the introduction, Aaron learned that these were Counselor Mahet's wife, Madame Liana, and their daughter, Halir Mahet. Looking at the young girl with dark green wavy long hair and deep brown bright eyes in front of him, Aaron finally remembered the source of the familiarity. This was the student taught by the Jacob family demigod after he was severely injured, and who was almost scared mad by Aemon because of it. After a polite handshake, Aaron withdrew his gaze. He had just activated his spirit vision and found nothing unusual, nor did the sheriff's Beander perception sense anything amiss. He still couldn't confirm the current state of that Jacob family descendant or whether he had taken on any disciples. Putting aside the doubts in his heart, Aaron decided to divine to confirm it after returning home that night. Dealing with various greetings and invitations from guests, Aaron stepped out of the crowd and immediately spotted Audrey at the corner of the second floor. She was wearing a pure white long dress with gold lace, her golden hair casually tied up, flowing smoothly and brightly, and her emerald eyes were like the purest gems. Her features and face shape combined to create a breathtaking beauty, her temperament elegant and pure like a blooming white lotus. At this moment, Audrey was gently stroking Evelyn, who was perched on Susie's head, and looking at him with a smile. South Continent, West Bayron, north side of Star Plateau, west of Pass River Valley, a forest somewhere between North Bankuqua City and Caesar Port. A young woman with light golden hair tied in a bun and blue eyes, and a young man with brown hair, were walking through the dense forest. Many withered arms emerged from the ground, grabbing at their legs, but only tore their trouser legs and skirt hems, leaving no wounds. This was the effect brought by a sequence 6 inches zombie. A strange laugh sounded, and the brown-haired young man's body immediately stiffened, emitting bizarre sounds from his mouth. "Sharon, Marich, I've finally found you two traitors. No one can protect you now." Marich's figure turned stiffly, his face becoming incomparably hideous, and another person seemed to be hidden in the reflection of his eyes. This was the forced possession of a sequence 5 inches wraith, controlling the enemy. Sharon, her body covered in wounds and her face pale, looked at the slowly approaching Marich. She let out a soft breath and tightened the bracelet on her wrist. It was the last gift her teacher had given her. Silently, the bracelet shattered, and an imperceptible fluctuation emerged, merging into the spirit world. In a certain place deep within the spirit world, a translucent headless female figure quietly appeared. She had a bright and grand appearance, wearing a complex, luxurious, and dark black long dress, but there was a neat incision at her neck, and she held 4 identical heads. The 4 heads were covered in cracks, as if they had just been shattered and reassembled. Their blood-red eyes suddenly opened, looking towards a certain place outside the spirit world. Marich's fingers grew sharp claws, and his teeth uncontrollably elongated, while a piercing shriek that could burst eardrums and harm spirits emanated from his mouth. Invisible waves swept towards Sharon, but then quietly returned to calm, as if nothing had happened. The figures in Marich's 2 pupils were gradually occupied by a gigantic, illusory figure of a headless woman, whose head, all 4 of them, were held in her hand. At the same time, a gigantic, sky-obscuring phantom appeared behind Sharon, which was precisely the headless woman. A faint, unreal phantom emerged from Marich's body and fled into the distance without any hesitation. After Marich regained control of his body, he immediately sat cross-legged, fighting against the desires in his heart and the intense malice, and the various anomalies on his body gradually returned to normal. The head held in the right hand of the gigantic illusory figure behind Sharon opened its scarlet eyes and looked at the phantom fleeing in the distance. A sharp, piercing roar echoed from afar, and the entire forest collapsed downwards into a large pit. Points of light condensed and contracted to form a translucent crystal, appearing before the head of the illusory figure that had opened its eyes. It was the Beander characteristic of Sequence 5 Wraith. The wounds on Sharon's body rapidly healed and disappeared at a visible speed, which was the powerful self-healing ability granted to her by Zombie. Sharon did not pay attention to the wounds on her body, nor did she look at the Sequence 5 Wraith Beander characteristic that had already fallen beside her. Sharon, who originally showed little change in expression even in the face of death, had a tear streak across her delicate, doll-like face. Clutching the broken bracelet tightly in her hand, she looked up at the gigantic but very illusory figure, her voice low and slightly choked as she spoke, "Teacher." The other three cracked heads held in the hand of the gigantic illusory figure trembled slightly, seemingly wanting to open their eyes, but ultimately failed. The only head that had opened its eyes, with long golden hair, wrapped around Sharon and the cross-legged Marich, instantly disappearing from the spot. A moment later, a black door appeared, and an arm whose mere aura made one tremble extended from it, emitting undisguised malice. The ordinary animals in the deep forest grew grayish-black wolf fur, their mouths wide open, constantly dripping viscous saliva. Some lost their hearts and fell to the ground, yet climbed back up as if nothing had happened. Others became transparent and ethereal, as if turning into phantoms. The tall, dense trees turned black, their branches twisted and mutated, yet they were as hard as steel. Abomination Sua's mere aura corrupted everything around him, causing them to either collapse and die tragically, or mutate into Beander creatures such as werewolves and zombies. Even plants were mutated by his aura. After Sua's arm fully extended, a pulsating mass of flesh covered in black viscous liquid followed, forming the body of this abomination. He was like a gigantic tree doused in oil, with extending branches formed by numerous arms from which strange things protruded. On the trunk, on the surface of the viscous black liquid, countless bloodshot black and white eyeballs rolled around. Dozens to hundreds of arms made of viscous black liquid extended rapidly outwards, some blocking the high sky, some drilling into the earth, and some encircling from all directions. At a small pit not far away, a pitch-black arm dragged back a slightly illusory skull fragment. Sensing the familiar aura on it, more black arms surged out and extended into the spirit world, directly sealing off the spirit world in this area. After searching fruitlessly for a moment, Abomination Sua's aura became even more tyrannical and mania, and dozens to hundreds of black arms lifted and then slammed down heavily. With a thunderous boom, the original forest instantly collapsed, forming a gigantic crater several kilometers in diameter, filled with black, disgusting viscous liquid, emitting an aura of indulgence and depravity. Along with the destruction of this forest, the corresponding area of the spirit world was also damaged and disrupted by Abomination Sua, falling into chaos. The gigantic, pitch-black tree-like figure that resembled one doused in oil vanished without a trace, but his lingering aura still affected the living beings in this area. Animals that had grown grayish-black wolf fur, and zombies and withered bones that crawled out from underground, continuously converged from all directions towards the deep pit, leaping into the deep pit and immersing themselves in the black, disgusting viscous liquid, as if embracing their final destination. In a valley on the southwest side of Caesar Port, Sharon and Marich's figures appeared. The once tall phantom in front of them began to shatter inch by inch, turning into points of light that floated down and merged into the broken bracelet in Sharon's hand. The bracelet, of unknown material, also transformed into an imprint that appeared on Sharon's right palm. Sharon felt the familiar aura from it, and her eyes grew even more resolute. Marich's physical anomalies had already recovered, and he silently looked at the imprint on Sharon's palm, picking up the Sequence 5 Wraith Beander characteristic that had fallen to the side and handing it to Sharon. The two exchanged a silent glance, then sped towards Caesar Port to the northeast. In an unknown area of the spirit world, the gigantic headless woman's figure, which had appeared, became increasingly illusory. Her 4 pairs of eyes closed simultaneously, and her figure vanished without a trace as if she had never appeared. On the south continent, on the road from Baron's Port to North Bangkokwa City, a group of people slowly advanced. Chek looked up at the red moon in the sky with some helplessness and quietly asked Bishop Montella, who had changed back into normal South Continent attire, "Bishop, when can we rest? I think we're still some distance from North Bangkokwa City. How about we take a break first? Only by recuperating can we deal with potential attacks." Just as Bishop Montella turned his head to offer another word of encouragement, a figure suddenly appeared above the team, clad in a plain white robe with brass-colored threads, completely white hair, and gray-green eyes. Luca Broust looked solemnly towards the southeast, feeling an undisguised, rampant malice spreading wantonly. Feeling the terrifying pressure mixed within, even from such a distance, it still made him tremble. This was definitely an angel. "The hedonist faction of the Rose School of Thought," he added in a low voice after a moment of silence, "Sequence 1 Abomination SUA." Then his figure disappeared. This matter had to be reported to the God of Knowledge and Wisdom Church headquarters. The Sequence 1 angel on the South Continent had taken action for unknown reasons. An existence of this level was far beyond what a demigod like him could handle. Regardless of the other party's purpose, it had to be reported to headquarters. Bishop Montella's ear twitched, and his expression also involuntarily sank. After a moment of contemplation, he shouted loudly, "Everyone, rest. Double the number of guards tonight and raise your vigilance." He then said nothing more and went directly to a carriage at the end of the team and got in. The carriage was empty, with no one inside, only a tidy desk with books neatly arranged on it, and various spiritual materials placed around. Bishop Montella skillfully set up the ritual, carving complex symbolic patterns. This was a mysticism that could directly contact the Church of the Knowledge and Wisdom's headquarters, originating from a certain archbishop's creation when he was a mysticism magister. Above the deep pit filled with black viscous liquid, a star-shimmering door appeared, and Luca Brewster's figure emerged from it. This was a traveler's door, performed by analyzing and imitating the Sequence 6 polymath. Because the divination ability from his original Sequence 4 prophet did not bring dangerous feedback, he judged that the leader of the Rose School of Thought's hedonist faction had already left, so he personally checked it to see if there were any clues. Luca Brewster's originally neat clergyman's robe had become wrinkled and even somewhat damaged. The spirit world in this area was destroyed and in chaos, making it impossible to obtain any useful information from it. He, who had teleported with the help of the traveler's door, was also affected by this. Looking at the viscous black liquid beneath his feet and feeling the malice and indulgence within it, Luca Brewster frowned deeply. With a slight movement of his hand, a bright and pure light rose, transforming into symbols that connected to form a light net covering the deep pit. The spread of the pollution was blocked. Luca Brewster, who had originally wanted to explore further, then looked at a ray of light shooting from a distance, frowned, and his figure gradually disappeared. The light stopped above the pit, and the figure of an old man wearing the Eternal Blazing Sun Church's archbishop's robe appeared. It was Archbishop Otto Apocalypse, who was responsible for the Eternal Blazing Sun Church's colonial diocese in the Intis Republic of the Southern Continent. Archbishop Otto first frowned and looked at the spot where Luca Brewster had stood, then looked at the black liquid churning within the light net below. Feeling the disgusting aura, his eyes showed obvious disdain. He spread his arms and devoutly and solemnly shouted, "Praise the sun." His body erupted with pure and clear light, illuminating every corner of the surroundings, transforming into a land without any darkness, leaving no shadows, and allowing nothing to hide, a land without darkness. All the contaminated plants, animals, and zombies around the deep pit, which had been affected by the abomination Siaeus aura, were incinerated by the holy flames. The black liquid in the deep pit evaporated little by little, gathering to form a mass of black gelatinous substance that twisted and deformed continuously. Archbishop Otto radiated circles of warm light, emitting power that purified areas such as corruption, filth, erosion, darkness, evil, and disease. With the assistance of several spears of no darkness, the black gelatinous substance quickly dissipated until only a pure black crystal remained. Apocalypse's body erupted with even more brilliant light. A tide of pure golden yellow light surged from his body, condensing into a layer of light armor covering his body. He reached out and grabbed the black crystal along with the surrounding soil. Pure golden yellow patterns emerged and flowed into the black soil in his hand until the lump of mud no longer emitted an evil aura. Dash 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 dash. In Empress Borough, Backland, at Earl Hall's luxurious villa, on the second-floor study, Aaron and Audrey sat facing each other, while Evelina and Susie lay on either side. Aaron lightly coughed and said to the surrounding valets and maids, "You all go out first. Miss Audrey and I need to talk alone for a while." The ordinary valets and maids naturally dared not disobey the request of this baron, and they all left. Only the personal maid Annie remained standing, looking at Audrey with a conflicted expression, wanting to speak but hesitating. According to custom, she should accompany her young lady in such a private space. Audrey's face showed a faint smile, and the young girl's voice was ethereal and pleasant to the ear. "Annie, you go out first. Aaron and I are just chatting. You can wait for me at the door. It won't be long." Annie no longer insisted and was about to leave, carrying Susie who was lying at Audrey's feet, but Audrey, seeing Susie's pitiful eyes, quickly spoke. "All right, Annie, just leave Susie here. She's very well behaved and won't cause trouble." Annie smiled helplessly, let go of Susie, and said with a slightly drawn-out tone. "All right, young lady, you spoil Susie too much. You really need to control her more. She just dug up the small sapling in the back garden yesterday, and that was something the master specially bought from South Wales." Susie barked once and quickly ran to Audrey's feet, lying down obediently. Evelina skillfully lay down on Susie's head. Watching Annie leave the study but not close the door, Aaron looked at the biscuits on the table, picked one up, and beckoned. Susie, with Evelina lying on her head, stuck out her tongue and scurried over again, biting the biscuit. Aaron pointed to the open door. Susie wagged her tail, ran over, and pushed the door shut with her head. Audrey, maintaining the elegant posture of a noble, watched quietly. Although she didn't speak, the smile in her emerald-like eyes was undisguised. Once the door was closed, Audrey also exhaled lightly, no longer maintaining the somewhat uncomfortable noble posture. She stretched lazily, then suddenly remembered that besides Susie, there was also one person and one cat in the room. "Oh dear, Audrey, you're really too relaxed. You're used to secretly stretching after Annie leaves. This habit is too ungraceful and must be changed in the future. You must maintain elegance." He probably didn't see, right? Audrey quickly sat up straight, her emerald eyes subtly shifting to look at Aaron, and her gaze met Aaron's slightly smiling eyes. Audrey immediately shifted her gaze to Susie, who was trying to share a biscuit with Evelina but was miserably rejected. Remembering their earlier eye contact, she couldn't help but want to cover her face. Oh no, he saw it. Should I say something to explain? Or pretend nothing happened? Aaron, who didn't know what Audrey was thinking, looked at the embarrassed Audrey with a hint of amusement. He took out the exquisite gift box he had already prepared from his jacket pocket and placed it beside Audrey's hand. Audrey sighed in relief when Aaron didn't seem to mind what had just happened. She looked at the gift box beside her with some curiosity and politely asked, "Is this a gift for me?" Aaron smiled and nodded slightly, signaling Audrey to open it. After politely thanking him, Audrey delightedly opened the gift box. What caught her eye was a necklace entirely composed of emerald green spiritual crystals. Golden patterns crisscrossed its surface, making it exquisite and luxurious. The pendant of the necklace was a dark cyan hexagonal stone, carved and polished smooth, with a profound and complex rune inscribed on its surface. The more Audrey looked, the more she liked it. She picked up the necklace, and as soon as it touched her hand, she felt a smooth, warm sensation, as if she were bathed in warm sunlight. Aaron looked at Audrey's joyful expression and introduced with a smile. "Its name is Emerald Chain, a mystical item specially crafted for you." Audrey's eyes lit up, and she couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Mystical item. Is this a mystical item? So what does it do? Can it fly or turn invisible? Or can it cast fireballs? Looking at Audrey's sparkling eyes, Aaron was momentarily speechless. In the eyes of a mysticism enthusiast, these abilities were indeed very appealing. Without directly answering the string of questions, Aaron took the emerald chain and showed Audrey the smooth, dark green hexagonal stone, which had been carved and embellished, on the pendant part of the necklace. Aaron pointed to an abstruse and complex rune carved on its surface and explained in detail. This is mainly to deal with sudden dangers, it's a very good life-saving item. But wearing it normally will also give you a warm and comfortable feeling, and can dispel a certain degree of fatigue and other negative effects. Audrey propped her chin on her hands, listening attentively. Even if it wasn't her favorite flying or invisibility, and couldn't cast fireballs, she was still very interested. Every time Father gives me a gift, he says it's related to Beyonder powers, but every time I don't find any connection, they're all fake. Listening and recalling the disappointment of receiving previous gifts, Audrey puffed out her cheeks, thinking unhappily. When you encounter danger, hold this pendant and utter this syllable. Saying this, Aaron pronounced the sound of door in ancient Hermes. Audrey froze for a moment, her face flushed. She thought she might have been daydreaming just now and didn't hear clearly, so she awkwardly asked Aaron to repeat it. After listening again, Audrey repeated the strange pronunciation, committing it to memory. Seeing that Audrey had remembered it, Aaron put away his smile and said seriously. If you really encounter danger, you must close your eyes when using this necklace. Looking at the serious expression on Aaron's face, Audrey also nodded earnestly. Aaron thought for a moment, feeling there was nothing else to emphasize. He glanced at the expectant Audrey and suddenly said with a smile. It might be a bit inconvenient for you to put it on yourself, and Annie isn't here. He cleared his throat. How about I help you put on this necklace? We can see if it suits you now, and if anything isn't quite right, I can easily perfect it. Help me put on the necklace. Audrey was stunned, momentarily at a loss. Usually, it was her maid or mother who helped her put on accessories. Audrey's cheeks flushed, and she stammered for a long time, finally nodding as if possessed. Aaron stood up and slowly walked behind Audrey, taking out the emerald chain. Looking at the girl in front of him, a faint fragrance wafted over. His hand gently lifted her soft, silky golden long hair, revealing her smooth, fair nape. Aaron gently put the necklace on Audrey. After adjusting its position, he let down and gathered her golden hair, then came to stand in front of Audrey, looking at the most dazzling gem in Backland. Audrey was wearing a pure white long dress with gold lace trim. Her golden hair was loosely tied, falling smoothly and lustrously, and her emerald eyes were like the purest gems. Aaron's gaze swept over the completely emerald green necklace at her collarbone. The intricately patterned pendant was embedded in the hollow where her two collarbones met, softening the lines of her neck and highlighting a mysterious yet pure feeling. Aaron genuinely exclaimed, truly worthy of being the most dazzling gem in Backland, beautiful Miss Audrey. Audrey felt her cheeks burning intensely, and she was too embarrassed to look up and respond. Although she was very happy inside, she mumbled for a moment, then let out a faint, like a mosquito. Not far away, Susie had long finished her biscuits and was faithfully sitting by the door, like a guard. Evelina on her head looked at Aaron and Audrey, curled her lip in disdain, scratched Susie's golden fur, and muttered in a voice only she could hear, "Hey, humans. Dash 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 dash." Mist Sea, Rashad Island, Emerald City. In a magnificent castle made purely of emerald, Bernadette stood on the balcony of the most scenic semi-open room inside the castle. Candlelight illuminated the spacious room behind her, where open books were scattered everywhere. On the central table lay 3 slips of paper, on which were written in the most common Lonis, Fasak, and Intis languages respectively, the origin of order and shadow, the great emperor of the Chaos Kingdom, and the Lord of Order who wields rules. This method maximized the avoidance of contact with the existence pointed to by that honorific name. Bernadette had returned to Emerald City after her investigation into the peculiar spiritual body at the Kingdom Museum yielded no results. She had scoured all the books she had collected but found no clues about this honorific name, as if this honorific name and the existence it pointed to had appeared out of thin air. Order, Emperor. Bernadette repeatedly chewed on these two words in her mind, her mood inexplicably agitated. Suddenly, she felt like going out for a walk. Bernadette's heart stirred slightly. As a Sequence 3 clairvoyant, such a sudden impulse was often not a reflection of her own emotions, it was more likely a feedback from peeking into destiny. Bernadette's body gradually etherealized, surrounded by dazzling starlight. Stars, one after another, emerged, dense and brilliant. A pair of almost transparent eyes appeared before her. They had no eyelashes, were cold and emotionless, and were precisely the eyes of Peking. After becoming a demigod, the eyes of Peking were no longer confined to the human body, they could be placed on others. What they saw was equivalent to what she saw, and once they entered a concealed state, they were difficult to detect by other means. Indescribable lights seemed to flash within the cold and emotionless pupils. Moments later, all of it vanished without a trace, as if the scene just now was merely a false fairy tale. Bernadette frowned, muttering in a low voice, "Caesar Harbor." Bernadette was very familiar with this place. It was the first official port her father, Roussel, established after opening new sea routes. After Roussel established the empire and declared himself Caesar, this port was also named Caesar Harbor. After Roussel's demise, she followed in his former footsteps, coming to Caesar Harbor and living there for a period of time. Thinking of this, Bernadette's face showed a mixed expression of longing, disappointment, doubt, and other emotions. Then, her eyes lowered, suppressing the surging emotions in her heart, and she whispered to herself, "No matter how long it takes, I will find the truth." Her voice echoed in the air, but her figure had long vanished. Amidst the flickering candlelight, the 3 slips of paper on the desk spontaneously combusted without fire, and instead of producing smoke, colorful, fantastical bubbles emerged. Moments later, the dreamlike scene dissipated, and everything returned to calm. The slips of paper disappeared without leaving a trace, and all the previously haphazardly placed books were neatly arranged on the surrounding bookshelves. The red moonlight shone down, tranquil and peaceful. In Empress Borough, Backland, at Count Hall's luxurious villa. His eye sockets were deeply sunken, and the human skin on his body had long vanished, replaced by black skin with red liquid flowing from it. His skin slowly became like that of a devil, deep black, with red liquid flowing. His eyes also began to turn crimson, and his entire body exuded the aura of a devil. Aaron narrated vividly. Susie was also lying between Aaron and Audrey, listening very intently. Well, even if she didn't understand, only Evelina was boredly pulling at Susie's golden fur. Audrey's cheeks were flushed, her fists clenched, a little scared yet wanting to continue listening, until she heard that the devil named Jason Buria was killed by Aaron, then she finally let out a long breath. This was something she couldn't fully understand from the newspapers. With the first-hand account, Audrey felt as if she were on the scene, witnessing the battle with her own eyes, which completely satisfied her fantasies about the Beyonder world. The kind and beautiful Miss Audrey, with the help of her assistant Susie, successfully captured the heinous murderer, punishing evil and promoting good. Audrey thought, somewhat distracted. Looking at the expression on Audrey's face, Aaron thought for a moment and decided not to shatter this precious longing. Aaron glanced at the wall clock and lightly coughed, saying, "Audrey, I think we should go downstairs, otherwise the party will be over." He even made a joke, "If we don't go out soon, I'm afraid Anne will rush in and arrest me." Audrey also glanced at the time, it had actually been 2/4 of an hour. She immediately felt a bit embarrassed and mumbled a defense. Anne is very good, she just sometimes adheres too strictly to the rules. As Audrey spoke, a sentence suddenly popped into her mind for some reason. Unmarried noble men and women are not allowed to stay alone in a room, even during the courtship or engagement phase. If noble men and women are together, they are usually accompanied by a guardian to ensure proper conduct and avoid any situations that might cause misunderstanding. Audrey's cheeks instantly flushed crimson, and she stood up in a hurry, walking towards the door, almost tripping over Susie, who had also stood up. She fumbled to open the door while saying to Aaron, "Let's go, the party should be ending soon." Anne, the personal maid, was pacing back and forth at the door, anxiously glancing at the hallway clock. This was the 6th time she had done so. Clenching her teeth, Anne took a deep breath, prepared to be reprimanded, and was about to step forward to open the door, but before she could push it, the door opened. Audrey, with a flushed face, was startled by Anne at the door the moment she opened it. Aaron was following behind her, also walking out the door. Anne looked at Audrey, whose cheeks were flushed but whose attire was neat, and she breathed a sigh of relief. Her gaze lingered on the emerald green necklace around Audrey's neck, and a hint of admiration flashed in her eyes. Seeing Aaron behind her, she immediately understood. In the ground floor hall, the banquet was already nearing its end. Some people were laughing and chatting, but more people seemed absent-minded, their gazes wandering as if searching for something. It wasn't until they saw the two figures descending from the second floor that many people's eyes flickered. Councilman Mahat proactively went to greet them, smiling as he spoke. "Beautiful Miss Audrey, your attire today is captivating. You and Lord Aaron truly make a perfect match, a talented man and a beautiful woman." As a believer of the Evernight goddess, and a supporter of the new party, he was naturally pleased to see the relationship between the East Talker family and the Hall family progress further. Moreover, Lord Aaron's proposal perfectly aligned with his political aspirations, so he spared no effort in promoting it. Aaron looked at Councilman Mahat with satisfaction, praising him in his heart. Very discerning, very sensible. He then followed the topic and exchanged warm greetings with him. Many Conservative Party members around them joined the discussion with smiles on their faces, all very interested in Aaron's previous proposal to establish the Kingdom Air Pollution Investigation Committee. There were also some people standing on the outermost edge, watching Aaron being surrounded, and they did not go forward to talk. Their expressions were fluctuating, and they quietly turned and left. Audrey walked away, her face flushed, and found her mother, Lady Catherine. Lady Catherine smiled as she looked at the blushing Audrey, then at the emerald green necklace, and stroked Audrey's soft golden hair, saying nothing. The banquet came to an end in such a peaceful atmosphere. After Count Hall's speech concluded, thunderous applause erupted in the banquet hall. At the entrance of the banquet hall, Aaron vigorously rubbed Susie's head, then bid farewell to Audrey, and boarded the luxurious carriage with Evelina, returning to the villa. In the luxurious East Talker villa in Empress Borough, on the second-floor bedroom, after sending Evelina out of the bedroom, Aaron skillfully set up a spiritual wall. His consciousness sank, passing through layers of illusory whispers, and arrived inside the magnificent grand hall. Aaron sat upon the throne and reached out for the divination pendant. After a moment's thought, he then incorporated the Black Emperor card into his body. The boundless dark golden mist seemed to gather into waves, forming a great wind. It formed a majestic armor on his body, a pitch-black crown appeared on his head, and a long cape of the same color draped behind him. Lines imbued with divinity also emerged on the armor. Feeling the surging power within him, Aaron nodded in satisfaction and closed his eyes to divine the whereabouts of Flora Jacob, the descendant of the Jacob family who had appeared in Backland. Vague dreams flashed by, and strange but meaningless patterns appeared. A moment later, Aaron opened his eyes, disappointed. Even with the fusion of the Black Emperor card, which greatly elevated his standing, without a practical and precisely directional divination medium, he still couldn't get a result from divination using only the information and inferences he had. But it wasn't a complete loss. The only thing that could be confirmed was that Ms. Flora Jacob, the demigod of the Jacob family, had already arrived in Backland. No other information could be obtained. It seemed she hadn't found the secret treasure left by the Jacob family yet. There was still some time before she would be severely injured, sealed, and parasitic on a mouse. The Jacob family's treasure. Aaron's lips curled into a mocking smile. An Aemon clone was hidden within it. It was fortunate it hadn't been opened, otherwise, this demigod of the Jacob family wouldn't even have had the chance to parasitize a mouse. Putting away the divination pendant, Aaron was about to return to the real world when he heard a slightly hurried prayer. It came from a man. Aaron looked down at the contracting and expanding prayer light, which was Sid Watson's prayer. Aaron extended his spirituality and, from a strange perspective, saw Sid Watson in a room, confronting a man and a woman. The man and woman opposite him were both pale, with obvious burn marks on their bodies and blood-red eyes, as if suppressing the malice in their hearts. They were Sharon and Marich, and at their feet lay a strange dagger that was sometimes illusory and sometimes real. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.